So guys, what if Naruto was pervy student of Kuoh Academy and Rias is slave in high school movie?
Issei couldn't believe it. No matter who he asked today, nobody remembered his girlfriend, Yuma. He couldn't explain it. Yesterday he and Yuma met some students from Kuoh Academy. Even Matsuda and Motohama didn't remember Yuma. He checked his cell phone for her number and address, but even those informations were gone. It couldn't be that nobody really remembers Yuma anymore, could it?
Hi Issei, said a male voice. Issei stopped. He walked down a long corridor until this moment. Kuoh School really was a small town within a town. The campus was huge. In addition to the huge school building, which was right at the beginning of the campus, there was a tennis court, a baseball field, a soccer field, a large gym, an extra building for all the clubs, the huge schoolyard and of course the forest, which extended behind the main building. The last building on the huge campus was hidden in this large forest. It was the old school building. Originally, the Kuoh Academy consisted of this single school building and some forest around it. The Kuoh Academy used to be an all-girls school until the doors were opened to boys as well. Of course, many boys saw the opportunity, and all came to the school. Issei was a high school student of average height with short spiky brown hair. With 2 short locks of hair behind his head, and light brown eyes, he wore the standard Kuoh Academy boys outfit, which consisted of a black blazer over a white, long-sleeved dress shirt with black highlights with a black ribbon on the collar, matching black pants, and brown dress shoes. However, Issei's uniform differed in the fact that he wore a red t-shirt underneath his open dress shirt and blazer and wore blue and white sneakers in place of dress shoes. Naruto. Issei said in surprise. As usual, Naruto didn't seem particularly motivated or anything. Like Issei, Naruto was one of the less popular boys at school. Naruto's reasons were just different than Issei's. Issei was known to be a pervert. He always peeked through a little peephole in the girls' locker room at the kendo club or something like that with Matsuda and Motohama. It wasn't uncommon for Issei, Matsuda and Motohama to have been caught and given a good beating afterwards. Naruto was the worst student in the whole school. He never learned. He was often absent. He only did the absolute lowest to avoid being expelled from school and other things like that. He was the kind of student who didn't do anything and didn't seem to care what his future brought. He had often shown during brief discussions with the teacher that he didn't care. How many times had he discussed with Sensei Sakazaki? Nobody knew that, and it would stay that way. No one cared what Naruto was doing and he didn't care what other people were doing. He just wanted to be left alone and not let anyone near him. Issei was the only one Naruto spoke more than 4 sentences with. After that he always went his own way, and he wouldn't be seen for a few days, whether it was in class or anywhere else in town. Naruto. You remember Yuma, don't you? My girlfriend. Issei asked with hope in his eyes. Just as Issei was asking the question, someone approached them and overheard everything. You mean that girl with long black hair and purple eyes? Naruto briefly held 2 fingers to his chin and tried to remember. There were a few other girls who looked similar. Yes, exactly. She was wearing a school uniform from another school, Issei said excitedly. Then I remember. What's with her? Naruto asked and then yawned. He must go back to the roof and get some sleep. At least nobody bothered him on the roof. It was also not that easy to get there, and that's why Naruto used the place for his sleep when he didn't feel like studying anymore. This was always the case, but sometimes he overcame himself and showed up in class. No one remembers her anymore, said Issei. Even Matsuda and Motohama don't remember her. It's like she never existed. Issei was desperate. However, he was also glad that at least one person remembered her. Now the only question was why the others didn't remember Yuma anymore. At least Naruto did. Naruto just raised an eyebrow and gave him a sideways look. I am serious, Naruto. Nobody remembers her, said Issei. He knew that look very well and that's why he reacted immediately and told Naruto again. Otherwise, Naruto would be walking past him right now. Naruto sighed and gave his temples a quick rub, wanting to leave already. This conversation had been going on for far too long. Listen Issei, I have to go. See you another time, Naruto said and just walked past Issei. Just like Issei, he wore the regular boy's outfit. However, instead of the white shirt, he wore an orange t-shirt under the black blazer and black shoes instead of brown ones. Naruto also wore the black blazer open, which allowed everyone to see the orange t-shirt.
Issei was about to say Naruto's name, but the sight of a true beauty stopped him. Just as Naruto passed him, a girl as beautiful as an angel passed him. He knew this girl. She was the #1 beauty, as well as one of Kuoh Academy's 2 great ladies alongside Akano Himehima. Rias was a young lady. Her demeanor made her look like a woman in her late teens. She had white skin, blue eyes and an alluring physique, be it the big breasts or the almost perfect curves on her body. Her most distinctive feature was her long, beautiful, crimson hair that reached to her knees with a single strand of hair sticking up from her head. She also had loose bangs that covered her forehead and framed her face at the side. She wore the Kuoh Academy school uniform with white knee socks. Issei blushed and started to grin like he always did when he saw a beautiful girl. He had completely forgotten that he wanted to go after Naruto and still wanted to talk to him. Naruto stopped when he felt someone watching him. He narrowed his eyes and looked over his shoulder. Like the last few days, someone tried to follow him. He sighed and walked on. Why couldn't he just be left alone? His teachers weren't interested in what he was doing anymore, and Naruto was glad about that. So why couldn't his pursuer finally understand that he wanted to be left alone, especially when his pursuer was one of the more well-known people at school? He turned a corner and looked around at the same time. When he was sure that no one was watching him, he suddenly disappeared. He appeared on the roof a few seconds later and sighed. Finally, he had his peace, and he could finally sleep again. He just laid down on the school roof and clasped his hands behind his head. He closed his eyes and fell asleep quickly. He didn't care what that person wanted from him. He's just happy to be left in peace now. At least he saw all his friends again while he was sleeping. In his dreams he lived his real life and not in this world that wasn't his world. Why did he have to fall into that portal? Why couldn't he just have died and been reunited with both of his parents? He thought that by defeating Kagaya, he had finally done his duty and he could finally have a good life. After all, he had proved himself more than once, but as usual, his life had nothing but shit left for him. He didn't care what became of him now. He had often messed with these weird creatures with wings, some of which hang around here in Kuoh. He would have thought that without chakra he would die straight away. Instead of chakra he now had something called sacred gear. As usual, he had to get something to get by with. At that time, he had promised his parents that he wouldn't just voluntarily run into his death without fighting against it. Today he deeply regretted that promise. He would never have said it, but in the last moments with your parents, you simply say something like that. Had he known he would end up in this world, he wouldn't have made that promise. Why did he have to get this sacred gear in this world, which was extremely strong? Couldn't he have just been like any other normal person? Then he would already be dead, and he could have been reunited with his parents in the afterlife. Life sucked for Naruto Uzumaki, no matter what he did. His lips curled into a slight smile as he dreamed of a mission with Sakura and Kakashi. In his dreams he could see all the faces he missed again and there he could laugh and have fun. The hours passed and when he heard the school bell ringing, he frowned. He was torn from his beautiful dream and now he must make his way home again. He would be attacked by a beast one way or another. He didn't mind though. Maybe there was a creature today that was strong enough to take care of him. He got up and stretched once. He's glad the roof was so big, and he couldn't be seen from his current position. No matter where you looked at the roof, no one could see Naruto, unless someone could fly and get on the roof. Naruto yawned once and picked up his bag from the roof. He rolled his right shoulder once and frowned again. He couldn't believe someone followed him here. He looked over his shoulder and could see a white cat. However, this animal got up here. Naruto sighed. He crouched down and held out his hand to the cat. He had seen this cat a few times here in the schoolyard. The cat seemed to live around here somewhere. He had nothing against the animals in this world, only against nature itself. This world was impure. He could still feel chakra even though there was nothing left in his body and the chakra in the air was corrupted. He didn't know why. This world had some major wars, but it was no different in the elemental nation. There the chakra in the air was pure and not corrupted like here. The cat sniffed Naruto's hand and then gave it a lick before turning and just running away. Naruto watched the cat running to the end of the roof and then just jumping off the roof. Naruto raised an eyebrow and glanced at the spot where the cat had just disappeared. He shrugged his shoulders and then disappeared. After all, he must go home so he could just go back to sleep and maybe experience the mission again. He was roused from his sleep as he fought the guy alongside Sakura and was about to win. The white cat jumped back onto the roof and looked at the spot where Naruto was standing before. She walked over to the spot and sniffed a bit and meowed once before just vanishing into smoke. Naruto walked the streets of Kuoh towards the park. There he could feel the presence of one of these strange creatures. He avoided all the people while not thinking about anything. Naruto stopped when he felt someone watching him. He looked around attentively, trying to locate the person or being that was watching him. He couldn't see anything and sighed. He just kept walking, ignoring the feeling. Maybe this person or being managed to call him unnoticed. That didn't sound so bad, but as he unfortunately knew his senses, this wasn't possible. After a few minutes he turned onto a side street that led to the park. He walked down the long street and immediately noticed how the sky was slowly changing. It was always the same when those crow people showed up.
Otherwise, he wouldn't know what to call these beings. They looked like normal humans, but they could also spawn black wings from their backs and even fly with them. The first one who fought Naruto tried to chase him with it.
At first Naruto didn't want to fight, but when the guy just wouldn't leave him alone, he had enough and fought this guy. He had called him quickly so he could get home faster.
There were many dark colors in the sky. Dark blue, purple and black writhed and moved as if in a dance. The sun had disappeared and that made it look like it was night. Naruto tried to locate the creature's exact position and sensed where it was. He didn't feel like walking normally anymore, so he just disappeared. He reappeared at the park a few seconds later and surprisingly was able to see Issei. He was momentarily standing in front of a fountain and seemed lost in thought. Naruto wondered what the guy was doing here. He looked up at the sky and could already see a man who was wearing a black hat, a long gray coat, black pants and black trousers flying towards him with his jet black wings. He had black hair and blue eyes. Like each of these beings, he had black slits instead of normal round pupils. Naruto watched as Issei and the man talked briefly and then Issei told something about Yuma. After that, Issei ran away and screamed for help. Naruto frowned when he saw Issei able to jump quite a distance away. A normal human couldn't jump that far. He also seemed to be faster than usual in general. Of course, this was nothing like how fast Naruto could move with his sacred gear, still unusual by Issei's standards. Issei turned and ran away, quite quickly. The man with the black wings just flew after Issei and looked at him a bit. Naruto just moved at the same speed as the two, chasing them a bit. He didn't even know why he was doing this. He should just disappear and look for one of these beings again tomorrow. His dreams were still waiting for him. However, something stopped him. The only explanation he could give was that Issei reminded him a bit of Jiraiya. Just like Jiraiya, Issei was a big pervert. After a few seconds the man landed in front of Issei and that made Issei stop. He let go of his school bag and just looked in disbelief at the man with the black wings, which looked exactly like Yuma's. Naruto raised an eyebrow at what the creature said, something about demons. Naruto frowned. He really shouldn't be here. He should go to his home. He had an uneasy feeling that there was more to this world than he first thought. There seemed to be more than one weird being. The man told something about servants, kings and demons in general. It seemed that in this world there were demons who had servants and there were also servants who went rogue. This was somewhat reminiscent of the shinobi system. After all, shinobi were only servants of the Hokage or the team leader. Of course, they were not slaves, but still they carried out orders like servants and did whatever they were commanded. At least that was the basic idea of a shinobi. Issei turned and started to run, but the man created a blue spear out of nothing above his palm and went into a throwing position. Naruto watched as Issei ran away and the man threw the blue spear at Issei. The spear sped through the air and was about to pierce Issei. Naruto watched the last meters in slow motion. He wasn't exactly sure why, but something seemed to urge him to help Issei. Naruto didn't want that. Why did he have this damn feeling? He didn't understand. So far, he hadn't really cared about anything, and nobody had interested him. He only partially talked to Issei because he reminded him a bit of his old life. He was as ambitious and as perverted as someone Naruto knew well. Not that wise and that great of course, but still it was enough for Naruto to talk to him. Naruto frowned again and sighed. Time returned to normal, and just as the blue spear was about to pierce Issei, Issei simply disappeared. What? Yelled the man with the jet black wings. He saw Issei and someone else appeared a few feet in front of him. Naruto had an unconscious Issei slung over his shoulder, holding a katana. It had an oval guard plate and a dark red sword hilt. Naruto's hair and clothing were still moving slightly from the rapid movement. He really didn't feel like explaining to Issei how he could move so fast. That's why he just knocked him unconscious and grabbed him over his shoulder. The katana in his hand was his sacred gear. It gave him the ability to use a technique that allowed him to move so quickly.
Go away or you'll die, Naruto said. He would rather avoid a fight now. He just wanted to deliver Issei to his house and then went home himself.
Who are you and why are you helping a missing demon? You're a human. Naruto's voice was heard behind the man the next moment. You must have a problem with your ears. The man's eyes widened as the tip of a katana suddenly came through his chest. Before the man could even scream, he was consumed by fire. He wanted to scream and escape, but it was no use. Naruto had just been too fast and had pierced his katana through the man's lungs. After that he also ignited his katana and as a result the man was burned out by them and shortly thereafter his entire body was on fire without exception. Naruto pulled his katana back out of Danazuke's burning body and then the katana disappeared in a red light. Naruto narrowed his eyes as he looked over his shoulder. He knew very well that someone was watching him. He didn't know exactly from where or by who, but one day he would find out who was always watching him. He just wanted to go home now, as usual. This crow wouldn't have stood a chance against him. He just got too strong abilities for that through the sacred gear. So far nobody had been able to keep up with his speed or follow him with his eyes. Naruto just disappeared and reappeared in Issei's room a few minutes later. Luckily the guy had left his window open, and Naruto was able to get into the room unnoticed. He put Issei on his bed and then turned around again. He let his eyes wander for a moment and as expected, there were posters of naked women with big breasts everywhere. Naruto shook his head once and then disappeared again. He just hopes he hadn't made the biggest mistake in so easily revealing himself. Now several people knew about his abilities and that didn't bode well. He could probably call the crow, but his watchers now knew what he could do. Naruto appeared in front of his small apartment a few minutes later and went inside. His apartment was very small and there was hardly anything inside. He had a living room where nothing was inside. In his bedroom was only a closet for his clothes and a mattress on the floor. The kitchen and bathroom were standard, but even the furnishings in these two rooms were long outdated. Naruto didn't care. He just went straight to his bedroom and laid down on his mattress. He didn't even have a pillow or blanket. Naruto clasped his hands behind his head and closed his eyes. As usual he fell asleep within a minute and after an hour of sleeping, he formed a slight smile on his lips. He was back with his friends and there he could finally laugh with them again. His apartment was in an old building located on the outskirts of Kuoh. That's exactly how Naruto liked it, nicely secluded and quiet. Only older people lived around him and there was never any stress here. When Naruto finished school here in a few years, he would retire somewhere in nature and spend the rest of his life alone. Naruto paced the hallways of this damn building annoyed. Why couldn't he just have disappeared into nature? There he might have been called by a poisonous animal in his sleep. Brazil or Australia was said to have many poisonous animals. Of course, the police had to find him and force him to go to school. It wasn't like Naruto could just call everyone, but these people were innocent, and they were doing their job. Naruto. He stopped and frowned. That voice sounded familiar to him, but he wasn't 100% sure where it came from. He looked over his shoulder and then looked forward again and kept walking. He didn't want anything to do with this guy. Too much attention and the other students at least told the guy to stay away from Naruto. Naruto didn't understand why the guy didn't listen to everyone at school. But he didn't care either. He just kept walking and as expected the guy was stopped by all his fans. Naruto walked into the classroom and sat in the back seat. There was an exam today. Whether he passes it or not didn't really matter. He just must be there to write his name on the piece of paper. Otherwise, he must give his address to the school at some point. Even if Naruto turned in a completely blank sheet, he didn't get in trouble because there was a piece of paper with his name on it, proving his presence at the exam. Naruto was a year over Issei and thus his senpai. Luckily, he wasn't in the same class as any of the popular students, although there was one girl in his class who was also admired by many boys. She was like an idol for many. This person just walked into the class and took a quick look around. This girl's name was Yuki no Naka. Naruto felt a weird aura around this girl. It wasn't the same aura as those crow people or Issei. Naruto was sure that Issei was made into a demon. That would be the only possible explanation. Yuki was a beautiful young woman with a slim yet endowed build with a far more notable big butt. She had light blue, shoulder-length hair that had a longer portion of her hair put into a braid on the left side of her face tied into a single braid, as well as a single long skein of hair, also known in Japan as ahoge, and yellow eyes. She wore the same outfit as all the other female students from the Kuoh Academy. As usual, Yuki walked past each student and shortly after arrived by Naruto. Morning Uzumaki. Naruto really didn't know why Yuki always had to greet him. All the students had told her 100 times to just ignore him. He would never understand women, be it Sakura, although he knew her better than anyone as her best friend. Of course, there were Hinata, Tsunade, Ino or any other women from Konoha. In this world, that hadn't changed. Still, he knew full well that she wouldn't leave him alone until he answered her.
Morning Nonaka. As usual, his voice sounded emotionless and completely bored. Naruto was sitting at the very back by the window and Yuki was sitting right in front of Naruto. Yuki smiled slightly and then simply nodded before sitting down in front of him and laying her bag on her table. Naruto looked out the window and waited for Sensei Sakazaki to come to class. His thoughts wandered to a certain woman from his past. She bore a certain resemblance to Yuki. Yuki mostly had a neutral face and didn't show much emotion. Shizuka was the same. She was the student of a former enemy of Jiraiya. He was supposed to marry her, but Naruto managed to convince her before the war that she should listen to her heart. He knew the pain in her eyes. He had felt the same pain because he had unrequited love. Shizuka's eyes had that same sad gleam when she thought no one was looking. Shizuka was an attractive kunoichi, but Naruto was just like Jiraiya. His heart had chosen Sakura, and even if he resigned himself to being best friends forever, he couldn't love any other woman, at least that's how it was in Konoha. Here in Kuoh, he no longer had love for anyone, he had lost all feelings that would bind him to a happy life. He sometimes regretted it, but he made the choice to do it. He wouldn't allow himself to feel like that again so easily. After a few minutes, Naruto put down his pen. He had written his name on the paper and was about to sit back but was interrupted. His teacher stood in front of him and sighed briefly. Naruto looked at Sensei Sakazaki and raised an eyebrow. Why was he there? He no longer cared whether he got a bad grade or not. Listen, Uzumaki. This is my last try. Naruto raised an eyebrow. If you finish the exam normally like any other student, you can go home. Sakazaki was a normal-looking man, having dark brown hair and gray eyes. He was wearing a white shirt and black pants. Naruto frowned. Why did Sensei Sakazaki have to say those words? Naruto couldn't ignore this. That way he could go straight home without being bothered by anyone. He would have permission from his teacher. Naruto sighed. All right. Naruto picked up the pen again and started to write. Yuki looked over her shoulder and saw everything. It looked like you could get Naruto to work after all. All other students ignored this conversation. It was quiet in class. After all, an exam was being written. Sensei Sakazaki smiled contentedly and went forward again and monitored his students. After all, he must make sure nobody cheated. Naruto wrote without pausing once. You couldn't tell by looking at Naruto, but he got a special ability since he came into this world. Once he had read something, he could remember everything immediately. He knew the answer to every question. At the beginning he had read through many books, and through his ability to remember everything directly, he had acquired a great deal of knowledge. Nobody would believe that Naruto answered every task correctly. The exam was 2 hours long, but Naruto was done after 20 minutes. He put down the pen and stretched once. He felt his tired muscles twitching briefly and then becoming a little more awake.
He packed his things in his bag and stood up. Yuki heard Naruto stand up and looked over her shoulder for a moment. Naruto picked up his piece of paper, where something was written everywhere. She looked back at her paper and continued writing. Sensei Sakazaki looked at Naruto in surprise as he came to the front of the class and handed him the piece of paper. I can go home now, right? Naruto looked at his teacher and he looked at his paper for a moment. His teacher couldn't believe it. Naruto had completed the entire exam within 20 minutes and at first glance he had answered every task correctly. He smiled slightly. You can. He saw Naruto nod in satisfaction and then headed for the door. It looked like Naruto was a genius. He had never studied or paid attention in class, and yet he could answer every single question perfectly. He made a mental note to think more along those lines.
He seemed to have found a method to motivate Naruto. Maybe he could get through to Naruto. He put the note on his desk and then supervised the rest of his students. Most of the students didn't even finish 20% of the exam, and Naruto had just finished the entire exam in that time.
10 minutes later, as expected, Yuki came forward and handed her note to the teacher. As expected, Nonaka, you're welcome to go on break already. Yuki bowed briefly and smiled slightly. It wasn't for nothing that she was the class representative and the best in the class. She was very popular with teachers. She was a model student. She had good grades in all subjects. She went to her desk and packed her things before picking up her bag and walking out of the classroom as well. She had always been first, but today Naruto was a little faster than her. When she closed the door behind her, she closed her eyes briefly and expanded her senses. You could briefly see a green aura appearing around her, and shortly after she disappeared again. She opened her yellow eyes and went away. She had enough time to lose sight of her target for a brief amount of time and watch someone else. Issei Hyodo had become a demon, and so far, he hadn't shown signs of even knowing it. He could only be reincarnated by 2 people at this school. Until a few days ago, she never realized that Naruto had a sacred gear. She was there when Issei was attacked by the fallen angel a few days ago. She had seen everything. Naruto was human. Yuki knew that much. He wasn't a hero like her either, so the only logical explanation left was that this katana had to be a sacred gear. All she knew so far was that he could move extremely fast and control fire with his katana. At least that's what it looked like. At least the blade suddenly caught fire when Naruto pierced the fallen angel with his katana. When she got to a place in the school where no one could recognize her, she just disappeared. It wasn't for nothing that she was sent to Kuoh to monitor the demons here. She was a strong hero and had the necessary skulls to defend herself. Naruto walked the streets of Kuoh. He let the sunshine hit his face and he remembered something about Konoha. The weather in Konoha was always good, bad weather was rare, and the sun shone most of the time. He closed his eyes and enjoyed the warmth on his face. Through his senses he didn't collide with any humans, he just avoided the people and kept walking without being disturbed. It was a comfortable feeling and he even started to smile slightly. He didn't even know he could smile outside of his dreams. He didn't care. He just enjoyed the warmth. He looked sideways after a few minutes and stopped, his eyes focused on a girl being cornered by some delinquents. Naruto sensed that this girl was a demon just like Issei. He just wanted to move on and ignore that. After all, his mattress was waiting for him. He still must complete the mission. He turned forward again but paused briefly. He heard the girl threaten all the guys to call them hot-tempered. Naruto immediately thought of a few faces. He really didn't know why he always meets such women or girls. So far, he had managed to stay away from such girls. In the Kuoh Academy, there hadn't been a girl with such a characteristic that found him interesting. Yuki was rather stoic like himself and didn't often show emotions. She usually smiled slightly and always briefly showed how she felt and then she became stoic again. It's always been like that. Naruto didn't even know why he couldn't ignore women who had that special characteristic. Whether it was Sakura, Tsunade, Kushina or even Ino, he could never ignore such women. He seemed to have inherited that from his father. Naruto turned back and walked towards the four men and the girl. He was internally screaming that he should just walk away and ignore this, but his body didn't obey him. He acted on his own and ignored Naruto's orders. I like you, sweetheart. You have a hot temper. I love breaking women like that. One of the men had once again put his arm around the girl's shoulders and pulled her to him. Hey! Keep your hands off me, you bastard. The girl freed herself and took a step back. She was still surrounded by all the men, and she was about to use magic, but before she could do that, a male voice rang out. Hey, don't you hear that the girl isn't interested? The girl looked behind her and could see Naruto. He stood there with a stoic look, but something was different in his eyes. It looked menacing and the guys around the girl twitched at the look. It was a Kaler's look. Naruto hadn't used that look for a long time and was projecting his caller intent on someone else. He may have lost his chakra, but he could still project something like his caller intent onto others with no problems. Hey, who are you? One of the men asked in a shaky voice. He had briefly thought someone had rammed a sword through his heart, only to feel nothing the next moment. It was terrifying. The girl used the moment and went to Naruto. The men were too focused on Naruto and didn't even notice the girl walking towards him. She was standing behind Naruto now. Naruto ignored her and just looked at the men. He said nothing and didn't move, he just looked at them. The men all swallowed. They wanted to say something, but it didn't work. It was as if an invisible force was choking them. Their hearts were pounding, and everyone was sweating. The girl just looked to the four men and saw the frightened eyes of the four men who arrogantly tried to drag her away. She had never seen anything like this. Naruto moved his arm and that made each man flinch and step back. Naruto pointed at the four men with a finger. His blue eyes were as cold as Antarctica. They had no joy or warmth inside. You couldn't see anything there that you could see in anyone else. Those eyes were just too much for the men. When Naruto's voice rang out, each man's eyes widened. Go away. Otherwise, Naruto couldn't finish his speech because the four men turned around and ran away in fear. Naruto closed his eyes and when he opened them again, they were back to normal, lifeless and stoic. He looked over his shoulder. Are you alright? The girl looked at Naruto and nodded. Naruto looked her up and down once. The girl was a beautiful young woman shorter than Naruto with long crimson hair reaching her waist and pink eyes. For someone her age, she had a distinctly slender yet curvaceous figure with enormous, bouncy breasts and sizable buttocks. She wore the Kuoh school uniform. Naruto couldn't remember such a beauty. What? Naruto shook his head briefly. He really didn't know what he was thinking. He had never thought of Rias Gremory like that before and she had the same look as the girl before him. It couldn't be because of the red hair alone. Of course, he always thought red hair was beautiful. His mother was the most beautiful woman in the world for him. He just tried to ignore that and looked into her pink eyes. I am Mio Naruse. Mio gave a short bow and Naruto raised an eyebrow. Naruto Uzumaki. Mio looked at Naruto again. Are you a student at Kuoh Academy? Yes. I think you're new. You better stay away from me. Kuoh Academy is just down the road from here. Naruto pointed in the direction he just came from. The Kuoh Academy could even be seen in the distance. Mio looked in the direction and then back at Naruto. Huh? What do you mean, Uzumaki-san? Naruto waved his hand in front of his face. It doesn't matter that much. Naruto dropped his hand next to his body and then looked up at the sky. He frowned. He really wanted to go home. He already talked to one person more than he would like. He even had specific thoughts about women for the first time. He really needed to get out of here. Otherwise, something could change in his life, and he didn't want that. Can you take me to Kuoh Academy? She looked away and Naruto followed her gaze. Many men around looked them at her with arrogant looks. Naruto looked up at the sky. I got this power from you. but you don't protect me from something like that? Sacred gears were given to humans by God, of course. The sacred gears choose their own owners, but it was God who created them all and entrusted them to humans. He did this so that people could also defend themselves against the supernatural races. Naruto only knew this because he found out about it from his sacred gear. When he first awoke in this world, he got an explanation from the spirit, who was sealed inside Naruto's sacred gear. The spirit had told him about God and also about the supernatural races, but not exactly what they were called and what kind of races there were. So far Naruto knew about these crow people and recently about demons. Naruto sighed and then looked at Mio. All right. Naruto turned and walked in the direction he had just come from. So much for an early sleep. Naruto wasn't sure why, but he had a hunch that he wasn't just going to take her to school. Mio went after him and walked next to him. She carried her bag next to her and looked at Naruto with some interest. She could feel a strong aura from him. He's human. That meant he must have a strong sacred gear. Is anything Naruse? She could tell beforehand. Naruto didn't show any emotion. She just smiled and shook her head slightly. It's nothing, Uzumaki-san. Naruto shrugged and looked ahead again. Mio looked ahead and smiled slightly. However, she did get a visible vein above her forehead when she felt some men looking at her. She would like to crush these men with her gravitational magic, but she wasn't allowed to do that, and because of Naruto it was just a look. Since he walked beside her, no one dared to approach him and her. Naruto saw straight away how annoyed Mio was by all the looks. She had the exact same expression on her face as Sakura had when she was about to explode. Naruto sighed and just kept walking. He absolutely had to meet a girl like that today. It really had to be the kind of girl he just couldn't ignore, no matter how hard he would try. Couldn't Issei have met Naruse? Then I wouldn't have this problem. After all, they're both demons, so they should get along just fine. Naruto looked at Mio once. He could see her trying not to explode. He looked ahead. Forget Issei. He would only end up in the grave with this girl. Yuto would have been a better fit. He would at least treat her decently and not provoke her like Issei. Naruto stopped and Mio stopped too. Her anger subsided for a moment as she gave Naruto a confused look. Naruto had his eyes closed. He looked in the direction of some men and opened his eyes. Mio also looked in the same direction and was allowed to see how the men looked a bit shocked and then turned around and just left. They seemed to be sweating. Naruto looked at each man who was looking at Mio with lustful looks and then just walked on again. Mio looked after Naruto and wondered what he had done. Now not a single man was looking at her. She followed him quickly and after a few steps she was next to him again. Naruto just sighed and put his hand in front of his forehead. That is so annoying. He took his hand away and looked up at the sky with his eyes closed. Now he really stood up for Mio. He had never done anything like this before, except with Issei in the park. Although that was a different situation. Issei's life was in danger there and right now it wasn't such an extreme situation as in the park with Issei. He didn't get it. He also didn't want to understand why he's doing such unreasonable actions now. He just wanted to go to his apartment. Hi Uzumaki-san. Naruto looked at Mio with one open eye. I don't know exactly how, but thanks for your help. Mio smiled at him in thanks, closing her eyes and tilting her head slightly to the side. Naruto looked at that face and stayed silent. Only when Mio opened her eyes again Naruto nodded and turned his gaze forward again. He didn't know what to answer now. In a few meters they would walk through the big gate, which lead to the schoolyard. At the gate, he would finally be able to leave Mio, and this time he would use his ability to move quickly so it didn't happen again. Naruto stopped in front of the big gate that connected Kuoh Academy to the city. He looked at Mio. You should be fine from here. There are enough students who will help you. Just be prepared that pretty much every boy at this academy will give you certain looks. There are already 3 girls here who always get certain looks. Naruto pointed his finger at the main building which was straight ahead. There you will find everything you want to find on the first day. Naruto then lowered his arm again. Excuse me now, I have to do something. Mio watched as Naruto turned around. Hey, wait a minute. Naruto stopped and looked over his shoulder. Is anything else? He didn't want to stand at this gate any longer. This would only draw unwanted attention. After all, he was standing next to a real beauty. She would become one of the most popular girls along with Rias Gremory, Akeno Hamejima and Yuki no Naka. Naruto was sure of that. It would be better if he didn't have something to do with girls like them. Don't you have school too? Naruto just shrugged. You'll understand soon enough. After that, he looked ahead again and raised his hand as Mio thanked him again. He turned a corner and was no longer in sight. Mio looked at the spot where Naruto disappeared for a few more seconds and then turned around. She must find Rias Gremory and Sona Seatree first. She was given permission to live here, but she still must meet with the 2 families that rule Kuoh.
Naruto frowned as he woke up. He really would like to know why he hadn't dreamed that night. He looked at his alarm clock and could see that he had to get up. but he just laid there, he just turned around and closed his eyes again. He wanted to go back to Konoha, and he could only do that in his sleep. Why he hadn't dreamed that night was a mystery to him. He had already closed his eyes again and was about to fall asleep until he opened his eyes. The doorbell in his apartment was broken. There was also no need to have this bell repaired again. It's just too loud for that. He heard someone knocking on his apartment door. His apartment was small and that's why Naruto heard even normal knocking rather loudly. He frowned and stood up. He only wore boxers now, so he headed for the door. He looked through the hole in the door, so he could see who was in front of the door. He moved away from the hole in the door and just stared at the door in disbelief. How did this woman get my address? I haven't told anyone about my apartment and even the school doesn't even know where I live. In front of the door was the nurse from the Kuoh school. Students aside, she was the most popular woman in the entire school. She even had more admirers than Rias or Akano Himahima. Naruto sighed and heard her knock again. By the way, you could hear that she only did it with one finger. No matter what she did, it was always elegant. Even the normal tapping was elegant with this woman. Naruto grabbed the doorknob and pushed it down. So far no one had seen his torso. His muscular torso had many scars. He had enough scars all over his body from the last war. They weren't particularly big, but he had a particularly large number on his upper body. There were 21 scars alone. Someone couldn't see them properly, but they were visible enough to be seen. Uzumaki. Miss Hasegawa, can I help you? Naruto met her green eyes. Chisato was a stunningly attractive woman with hip-length black hair that had bangs hanging on the right side with two hooves. Green eyes, a mole under her left eye, red round glasses, one earring on her left ear and a voluptuous figure. She had very large breasts, being even larger than Mio Naris's, and her butt was bigger than Yuki no Naka's. Her work outfit consisted of a green knitted turtleneck, a tight black mini skirt along with her cross-garter motif stockings, and her signature white lab coat. She always had a serious expression on her face and there was rarely any specific emotion on her face. She seemed so grown up and her beauty was just a nice bonus. That's how all the males at school saw it. Naruto was not one of them. He was wary of this woman. He didn't know exactly what she was. She was stronger than anything he had felt before, at least in this world. Her aura partly resembled Naris's, but she was very different and much stronger, as if this woman were a goddess. You haven't been to school much lately. I was worried and that's why I made my way to you. You don't seem well. Naruto didn't flinch, although this beauty simply took a step forward without hesitation and placed her hand on his forehead. He just looked at her and his facial expression didn't even change. Chisato took a step back after 5 seconds. You don't seem to have a fever. She looked Naruto up and down once. Where did you get all those scars, Uzumaki? Chisato looked into his eyes and adjusted her glasses once. Naruto had a muscular body for his age. He didn't seem to be missing anything on the outside. She now must trust him to tell her if something was wrong. Street fights. Naruto was lying, but that didn't really matter. This lie would go best with his image, the delinquent who barely comes to school and never pays attention in class. You should know that this path is not the best, Uzumaki. I am tired of life. I am glad if I die as soon as possible. Either way, I don't care, Miss Hasegawa. Naruto raised an eyebrow and then frowned. Why was he telling her this? He hadn't realized it until he told her the truth. It was as if his body just reacted, and his mind went on pause for a moment. Chisato stayed silent and just looked into Naruto's lifeless eyes. His face was blank the whole time, even though she was standing in front of him. Any other boy would have blushed or tried to flirt with her by now. She pulled a piece of paper out of her white lab coat. Naruto looked at the note and took it. This is my number. Unfortunately, I have other people I need to visit. If you need anything or want to talk to someone, feel free to call me. The health of the students is important to me. Naruto watched as Chisato turned and started walking. He glanced after her and then at the piece of paper, which had a number and an address on it. He closed the door and wanted to throw the note away but stopped at his intention. He sighed and picked up his phone and put her number and address on his phone. That would be the only number with a name that Naruto had saved on his phone so far. He looked at his phone and saw his own reflection on the screen. He stared at his reflection, lost in thought, and shook his head after a few minutes. It doesn't matter. I wanted it that way. I will just go back to sleep. He laid down on his mattress and fell asleep straight away. He started smiling after a few minutes. He dreamed again about all his friends and both his parents. It was a beautiful dream. Naruto sat under a cherry tree and watched the pink leaves sway in the wind. It was almost mesmerizing for Naruto. The cherry tree was a little on the outskirts of the huge school ground. He closed his eyes and enjoyed the calm atmosphere. He was here in a small clearing in the middle of the forest, which stretched behind the old school building. In this clearing stood the single cherry tree. Naruto always had his peace here when he wasn't on the roof of the school. Since there was no exam today and he was already present in class, he went here after the first lesson and spent his time here. He still must go shopping today.
He saw out of the corner of his eye how a leaf from another tree flew through the air and was about to land on the ground next to Naruto. Naruto grabbed the leaf out of the air and looked at it. He smiled slightly as he remembered the training from back then. It was exhausting, but through this training he had managed to develop the Rasen Shuriken. He often had such a green leaf between his hands.
There were only pink leaves from the cherry tree around Naruto, and so this green leaf was very weird under the cherry tree. There was a strong gust of wind for a short time, and it probably blew a leaf from a tree out of the forest here. Naruto could still remember how difficult it was to understand everything. His understanding was not always at the level of today. He always had trouble understanding Kakashi's explanations and only through demonstration did he mostly understand. Through his shadow clones he mastered his wind element in 3 days. After that he created the Rasen Shuriken. It was a nice time. He always had a smile on his face. This was also the time when he became good friends with Sai. He didn't like the guy at all at first, but over time, Naruto started to like Sai. He ended up becoming one of his best friends alongside Shikamaru and Sasuke. He thought of a boy he met on a mission. The boy's name was Yukimura. He could play a beautiful melody with a simple leaf. The boy could, to some extent, control the three tails with his ability. He was taken advantage of by Orochimaru. On the mission, Naruto also met Gurren, a very strong kunoichi with the crystal style. With it she could crystallize everything, whether it was water or even a whole human being. She was a strong opponent. Since Naruto was busy fighting the three tails and Kakashi was fighting Gurren, he was spared the fight against Gurren. With the skulls he had then, he wouldn't have stood a chance against Gurren. Naruto put the leaf in front of his mouth and closed his eyes. He didn't know how it worked and just let his body do it. He still remembered how Yukimura's melody sounded. It was a very beautiful melody. She made you forget all your worries for a moment. Naruto heard the melody loud and clear. She was beautiful. He didn't even realize that he was currently creating this melody with the leaf in front of his mouth. It was a beautiful sight. Naruto was momentarily leaning against the tree with his back, one hand behind his head and the other holding the leaf to his mouth.
A pleasant warmth flowed through him. Several pink leaves from the cherry tree swirled around Naruto. The wind seemed to dance around Naruto and the pink leaves used the wind to dance around Naruto themselves. Some animals even appeared from the forest and looked at Naruto. He just sat there and played the tune with his eyes closed. His mind was momentarily in a trance as he created the melody. The animals sat around Naruto and closed their eyes. It was almost as if the animals were listening to the melody and liking it. There were some birds, some rabbits, a deer and even a fox. The fox even got on one of Naruto's legs and curled up. A person heard the melody and walked through the forest. It was a beautiful melody. She had never heard such a beautiful melody. It was almost hypnotic. She completely forgot what she was about to do and just followed the sound of the melody. Seeing a clearing in the distance, she could see some animals gathering there. The person kept walking and heard this beautiful melody more and more clearly. She would really like to know who creates such a melody and with which instrument. This melody sounded like a flute, but it wasn't exactly the same. When the person arrived at the clearing and stood at the side of a tree, she couldn't believe who was sitting there with his eyes closed and a leaf in front of his mouth. There sat Naruto Uzumaki, the delinquent and worst student at Kuoh Academy. Never did this person expect Naruto Uzumaki to have such a talent. The sight was almost magical with the pink leaves dancing around him and the animals around him. It was as if a musician of nature was making music for the animals here. The animals all seemed to love the melody. They all moved their heads from left to right at a slow pace. Everyone has their eyes closed. A bird even sat on Naruto's blonde hair, enjoying the tune. Naruto didn't know exactly what that feeling was, but he didn't care right now. He just enjoyed this warm feeling that flowed through his whole body. It was almost as if he was back in Sage mode. That warmth always flowed through him there. A few minutes later Naruto stopped and took the leaf from his lips. He opened his eyes and at the same time all the animals opened their eyes. Naruto looked around confused. Why are there animals all around me? He didn't even know there were so many animals in the forest around the school. He would understand the birds, but even a deer and a fox could be seen. He felt something on his head. He moved his head and the bird that was on his head flew away. He looked after the bird in confusion. He frowned and then looked at the other animals, which were already about to go into the forest. Only the fox on Naruto's legs just stayed there. Naruto looked at the fox and gave a little twitch. This fox really looked like Kurama. The red fur and even the black rims around the eyes were the same. The fox only needed 9 tails and then Naruto would think his partner would exist in this world too. He smiled slightly and petted the fox a bit. The fox's fur was very soft and fluffy. Naruto could feel the fox purring. He liked being petted by Naruto. Naruto lifted his head after 2 minutes and looked at a person standing there between the trees. He didn't know how long she had been there. It was just like the animals from before. He just thought about how that melody sounded and after that he was like in a little dream. When he came out of that trance state, there were animals all around him and this person was standing there. Can I help you? Naruto addressed the person, and this seemed to snap the person out of a trance as the person gave a brief startle. Huh. Oh sorry. The person smiled slightly nervously. I didn't want to disturb you. I only heard you play that tune and stayed to listen to you. Naruto shrugged and then turned his gaze back to the fox on his legs. The fox slowly woke up and yawned once. The fox looked at Naruto once before running off again. Naruto looked after the fox and then looked back at the person.
Naruto stood up because the person didn't say anything. He brushed himself off once. He won't have his peace here anymore and that's why he'll either go home or go to the roof. He's not sure yet. His apartment sounded pretty good. He picked up his bag from the ground and began to walk. The person looked after Naruto and said nothing. She just stood there and looked at the cherry tree where she saw this beautiful sight. Naruto looked over his shoulder and when he couldn't see the person anymore and there was no one else around, he disappeared. He reappeared a minute later on the school roof and did the same as usual. He laid down on the roof and clasped his hands behind his head. Hi. Naruto's ears twitched. He heard a male voice. He hadn't even heard that voice before. Of that, he was sure. Naruto turned his head to the side and saw a boy about his own age. He could be in the same year. It looks like there's someone else who's swinging over the gutter onto the roof. The boy went over to Naruto and smiled lightheartedly. Naruto straightened into a sitting position. He had never seen this boy before. But one thing made him wary. The boy was a demon and not a weak one at that. Maybe he's here to call him. The guy might be strong enough, but that remained to be seen.
The boy now stood in front of Naruto and pointed at himself with his thumb. I am new here. That explained why this boy didn't look familiar to him. He seems to be new, just like Naruse. Maybe they came here together. What is your name? Naruto Uzumaki. Takagawa blinked once and then laughed lightly. Oh, the first boy who doesn't give me that funny look is the legendary delinquent at this school. You are quite famous, Narukai. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Narukai? He never heard anyone addressed him like that before. Then you should know that it's best to stay away from me. He just hoped that this Takagawa would get out of here and he could have his peace again. Under the guise of Yujiro, he appeared to be just a normal high school student dressed in the same school uniform as every other male. He had green hair that appeared to be a little slick in the back with strands of his hair showing off his forehead and purple-colored eyes. You won't get rid of me that easily, Narukai. You're much too interesting for that and just like you, I like to skip classes, so be prepared to see me more often. He grinned and then took a pack of cigarettes out of his pocket. He took a cigarette out of the pack and put it between his lips. Naruto just shrugged and laid back down. He crossed his hands behind his head and closed his eyes. He didn't care if Takagawa was calm, and he could sleep. Yujiro looked at Naruto briefly and then lit his cigarette. He sat down next to Naruto and quietly smoked his cigarette while looking at the clouds. He liked to look at the clouds or read light novels.
An hour later, Naruto was walking through the school corridors. He had completely forgotten that there was another exam today. He must take this exam again, otherwise he would have to give the school his address. He really thought there wasn't an exam today. Then he immediately thought of Chisato Hasegawa again. He still didn't know how this woman got his address. He would love to know, maybe magic or other techniques. In theory, anything should be possible with magic. Maybe she once read his mind with some kind of magic. He wouldn't like that. This would only explain how this woman got his address. Naruto walked into the classroom and as usual everyone ignored him. Because of this atmosphere, he didn't think it was that bad. Everyone wanted nothing to do with him and that's a good thing. He walked to his seat and sat down. He put his bag on the table in front of him and then looked out the window. There would be another change in his class. Not only Yahiro Takagawa was new to the class, Mio Naruse had also been in this class since yesterday. When Naruto found out today, he just wanted to get out of school forever. Why did that girl have to be in his class that he couldn't ignore? Even if he wanted to. So far, she made no move to speak to him and Naruto was glad about that. He just hoped that she listened to his advice and stayed away from him. He watched the students as they walked toward the school building. Hearing a familiar voice, he turned his gaze to the side. Hi Uzumaki. Yuki stood next to her seat and looked at Naruto with her yellow eyes. Hi Nonaka. He wanted to look away again, but today Nonaka seemed to want even more from him. Are you free later? Frightened faces could be seen all over the class, some gasped and even had to cough slightly from shock because they were drinking. Everyone looked at Naruto. Naruto frowned. He was getting way too much attention right now. He didn't like this situation. He looked straight at Yuki and wondered what this girl wanted from him. She never said more than hello to him before. Yuki ignored all the looks and just looked at Naruto with her blank face. Naruto sighed. She wouldn't leave him alone until he gave her an answer. He couldn't ignore this situation. Maybe she wanted to call him. That wouldn't be so bad. After all, she was neither human nor demon. She's not one of those crow people either. Maybe she's strong enough. Yes. He raised an eyebrow when she suddenly smiled. It almost seemed as if she would be happy about it. She put a note on Naruto's table and then sat down. Naruto opened the note and saw a number there. He just pulled out his cell phone and saved the number. The whole class just couldn't believe what was happening there. First Yuki asked him if he was free and then she gave him her number. All the boys would like to go to him and give him their opinion, but they wouldn't dare. Naruto Uzumaki wasn't known as the legendary delinquent of Kuoh Academy for nothing. Naruto looked to the side and met the pink eyes of Mio Naruse. She sat a little more centrally in the class. He raised an eyebrow when he saw her face. Did she seem a little annoyed? He looked out the window again. Otherwise, he would get even more attention. On the way to school someone had observed him again. Those crow people would probably never understand that he could feel them. Now they just seemed to be watching him. They no longer dared to attack him. Ever since he took down the guy in the park who was trying to call Issei, things went quiet around those crow people.
He still sensed the presence of these beings in the city, but they didn't seem to become active as usual. Perhaps they have understood that someone was calling one by one, and they have fewer and fewer members. Mr. Sakazaki came into the class and greeted everyone. He looked at Naruto's seat and smiled when he saw him. He was happy that Naruto was present. Naruto wasn't in class for the first 4 hours. He always came when there was an exam.
I wish you luck, Mr. Sakazaki had handed out all the slips of paper and then started the exam. He looked at his students and supervised them a bit. When he looked at Naruto, he saw something unusual. Naruto was writing. He moved his pen and didn't put it down.
It looked like Naruto would complete this test again completely. That pleased Mr. Sakazaki. He had finally managed to get Naruto to at least complete the exam completely. Naruto had a perfect score in the last one. It's too bad Naruto hadn't used his abilities before. He might not have such a bad reputation and had a lot of friends. Mr. Sakazaki didn't know how Naruto did it, but he didn't care either. It was only important to him that Naruto passed the exams with a good grade like his other students. He also looked at the 2 new students in his class. Mio Naruse and Yujiro Takagawa also took notes on this exam, even though they just started the class. Both were aware that they would have to write down the exams. They could have come here 2 months later. All the exams would already be written there. The 2 didn't seem to have any problems. He let his gaze wander further and continued to monitor his students. Naruto stood up like before after 20 minutes and picked up the papers. The exam consisted of 5 pieces of paper and Naruto had filled them all out. He didn't even know why he bothered. Today his teacher hadn't even told him that he could go home. He might have thought so. It didn't matter now. He gave Mr. Sakazaki the 5 pieces of paper and got a smile in response. You can go on break Uzumaki. Naruto sighed slightly. He would have hoped to go home already. Of course, he'll go home anyway. However, with Mr. Sakazaki's permission, it would have been less stressful. He walked back to his seat and packed his things in his bag. He picked up his bag and pushed the chair up to the table. He was just about to leave until Yuki gave him a piece of paper again. He looked at her briefly. Her yellow eyes met his blue ones and she seemed to be saying something to him. Naruto just closed his eyes and sighed. He put the note in his pocket and walked out of the room. When he had closed the door, he took the note out of his pocket again and read through the contents. Meet me behind the gym in 20 minutes. He raised an eyebrow. What does Nonaka want from me? He read the contents again and sighed. He would really like to go home and only come back here after school. At least he had told Yuki that he would have time after school. He just started walking. He was behind the gymnasium in a few minutes, leaning against the wall. He looked up at the sky and waited. When observing clouds, he always felt a bit connected to Shikamaru and that's why he liked it so much. After a few minutes, Naruto heard footsteps. He looked to the side and saw Yuki. As before, she had finished shortly after Naruto. Naruto took 2 steps away from the wall and then looked at Yuki. So, what is it, Nonaka? You have a sacred gear. What about it? Naruto could already guess that Yuki knew about his sacred gear. If he could sense the aura of other beings, then those beings must have sensed his sacred gear as well, otherwise, nobody would pay attention to him. All the crow people used to tell him they had to call him because he had a sacred gear. What is that? Naruto raised an eyebrow. Yuki looked at him with her blank face. He could see no motive behind the question. Of course, he wouldn't tell her about it. Surely you've already seen it. Naruto was sure that she saw him finish off the guy in the park with his sacred gear. Yuki nodded and looked Naruto up and down once. She looked at him again afterwards and narrowed her eyes. On which side are you? Huh. Naruto looked at her confused. He really didn't know what Yuki wanted from him now. You saved a demon. Yuki had been observing him for the past few days and she noticed that he wasn't just helping Issei. Mio Naruse was also a demon and he helped her too. It almost looked like he was an ally of the demons. You mean Issei? He sighed. Listen Nonaka. I don't know who you are and what all this is about, but I am not on either side. I just want to be left alone and not get involved in the affairs of you and all the other weird beings. You're not on the side of the demons. Are you having trouble with your ears? Naruto looked at Yuki annoyed. His eyes changed slightly. He could already think what this was supposed to mean. Apparently, Yuki didn't like that Naruto helped Issei. He didn't like it at first either, but that didn't change anything about the course. Yuki narrowed her eyes and a green aura appeared around her. Answer my question Uzumaki. Otherwise, I must assume you're an ally of the demons. I can't allow that. So, you would call me? Naruto grinned slightly. He was just waiting for something like this. A strong opponent that might call him. Then he could finally be with his parents again. Yuki held up her arm and a katana appeared in a green light. Her arms were also encased in armor. Naruto whistled once. Feeling the intense power, she might be strong enough to call him. She's a lot stronger than any of Naruto's opponents so far. If you don't answer me, I will have no choice. Naruto took a step forward and a pillar of fire appeared next to him. He reached into the pillar of fire and pulled out a katana. He touched Yuki's katana with his katana and grinned. Then let's fight Nonaka. Maybe you can call me, which nobody has been able to do before. They both looked at each other and stood there. You could feel the high tension in the air. Not here. Let's fight somewhere else. Yuki said this with a serious voice. Naruto just nodded and dropped his katana next to his body. Then let's go. I can't wait to fight you Nonaka. He took a step forward and touched her shoulder. Hey. What? Her words trailed off as she and Naruto suddenly disappeared. Naruto and Yuki appeared outside of Kuoh a minute later. Naruto let go of Yuki and just turned and took a few steps away from her before turning back to face her. Yuki just stood by and got into a fighting stance. I hope my little action didn't scare you, Nonaka. It went faster with my ability. Yuki's silence was answer enough. He got into a fighting stance himself and narrowed his eyes. He had a smile on his face. He could really die in this fight. He had a feeling. She won't be alone in this school for nothing. There were many devils, but Nonaka was completely alone, whatever she was. There was Chisato Hasegawa, of course, but she was different from Yuki. She was much stronger than Yuki and her existence was from a higher plane. Back then, Naruto only had such a feeling with Kaguya, who was feared as a goddess in the elemental nations at that time. The two were currently standing on a rocky surface. There were some isolated mountain formations around Kuoh and Naruto and Yuki were currently on one of these mountains. There was only rocky terrain here and otherwise nothing else. Here the two could fight without hesitation. Here they couldn't call someone by accident or anything like that. Here they were at peace. This was where the battle of the two would take place. The clouds began to block the sun's rays, causing a shadow to fall across the area where Yuki and Naruto were. Yuki was enveloped in a green light and right after that Naruto could see what Yuki was wearing now. Her battle outfit was tightly wrapped around her slim figure, and it appeared to be the typical attire for female heroes, which consisted of a navy blue leotard with a black collar and white skirt and a navy blue cape. All four of her limbs were covered by her spirit armor. Fancy outfit Nonaka. Is this your combat uniform? He looked at her and immediately felt that Yuki's power became stronger than before. It looked like this uniform or armor increased Yuki's powers. I am from the Hero clan. This is my battle armor. Naruto relaxed his stance briefly. Hero clan? He asked. Were there really heroes in this world? He's heard of heroes, but that usually made you think of Superman, Batman, or similar characters, not to people who had a green aura and carrying a weapon. Naruto turned and blocked Yuki's slash. His and her katana collided, both creating yellow sparks. I take it you are humans with special abilities. Naruto asked this while pressing his katana against Yuki's katana. The katanas trembled and rubbed against each other. Yuki disappeared briefly and appeared behind Naruto. She was very fast. Naruto and Yuki moved away from each other after a few seconds and looked at each other. Sorry Uzumaki, but I am going to call you now. I can't have someone of your abilities being taken advantage of by all the demons. Naruto raised both eyebrows. It seems he generally misjudged this situation. Yuki seemed more concerned. He sighed and stood ready. So, she didn't want him to be taken advantage of by Issei or anyone, she just seemed to want to protect him. I hope you make it, Nonaka. Naruto turned serious. He had an opportunity now and he wasn't going to waste it just like that. He could just say he's not on the side of the devils and that would be the end of it, but he could finally be reunited with his parents through Nonaka. Naruto's katana ignited and was engulfed in red flames. A great wall of red flames appeared around them. Naruto had created an arena with his control of fire. Yuki looked around briefly and narrowed her eyes. The green aura around her grew stronger. Come. Naruto said this and immediately after that they both disappeared and appeared in the middle of the arena. The green aura pulsated around Yuki's katana and a small inferno raged around Naruto's katana. Both blades collided, creating a shockwave. Yuki didn't seem bothered by the heat emanating from Naruto's katana. He suspects it had something to do with her armor. Naruto and Yuki clashed their blades 3 times in quick succession. Yuki jumped back after that and made a downward swing with her katana. She unleashed an arc of green energy. Naruto swung his katana, unleashing an arc of red fire. Both attacks raced through the air and collided with each other. Naruto stepped aside and dodged a slash from Yuki. She appeared behind him and tried to split him in half. Naruto turned and made a horizontal slash with his katana. The fire around the blade raged the whole time. Yuki blocked the blow, narrowing her eyes. Even with her armor on, she could feel the heat somewhat. Yuki pushed Naruto away and unleashed another arc of green energy. Naruto turned away in midair and then blocked a slash from Yuki. Both briefly exchanged blows several times and small pressure waves appeared again and again. Fire and green energy were unleashed again and again. Naruto blocked a horizontal slash from Yuki and then kicked her away. Yuki flew slightly through the air and had to turn sideways because Naruto had created an arc of red fire. Naruto and Yuki looked at each other and just stood there. Naruto narrowed his eyes. He could see Yuki sheathing her sword. She charged forward, seeming to prepare an attack. Naruto stabbed his sword into the ground, causing several pillars of fire to rise from the ground. Yuki had to stop and dodge some pillars of fire that shot out of the ground right below her. She unsheathed her sword and disappeared briefly. Naruto was allowed to see how his pillars of fire were simply cut in half by Yuki and negated in the process. There were cherry blossom petals everywhere in the air. Naruto narrowed his eyes and pulled his sword out of the ground. He wanted to charge but stopped. He looked over his shoulder and could feel a strong aura outside of his wall of fire. He looked at Yuki again and saw how she stormed off again. He blocked Yuki's slash and instead of pushing her away like before, he just held back and looked into her eyes. He would like to keep fighting here and maybe get called by Yuki, but someone was interrupting the fight. Nonaka. Someone is outside my wall of fire. Yuki's eyes widened briefly and then she looked at the wall of fire that surrounded Naruto and Yuki. She could feel it now too. A strong aura was felt just outside the wall of red flames. It was a demon, that much was clear. She moved away from Naruto and relaxed her stance. Naruto did the same. He snapped his fingers once and right after that the wall of red flames disappeared. Naruto looked in the direction where he could feel the strong aura. He would like to die, but he didn't want to drag Nonaka or anyone else into it. Very interesting. He clapped both hands. I come to Kuoh to have a look at the daughter of the Gremory and I meet a hero and a human with an unknown sacred gear. The demon was a tall man and wore a red jacket with yellow padded shoulders. He had pointy ears, white hair with a matching beard as well as purple eyes. He exuded a very strong aura. He's one of the stronger demons. I am very interested in your sacred gear. Maybe I should ingest this sacred gear. The demon looked at Naruto's katana while nodding to himself. It's a strong sacred gear. The boy was only human and yet this sacred gear gave the human enough skulls to compete against a heroine. Nonaka. Naruto looked at Yuki out of the corner of his eye. She also only looked at him from the corner of her eye. I would say that we pause our fight. If I die, that's no problem, but I don't want you to die. Yuki's eyes widened for a moment. She didn't expect Naruto to say something like that. She genuinely thought Naruto was an enemy. It looked like he just wanted to die by her hands. She hadn't really believed Naruto was on the side of demons from the start, but she had a duty and Naruto gave her no choice but to fight him. Naruto focused on his opponent. He was stronger than Nonaka. He could feel that. Naruto and Yuki both jumped away as a purple magic circle appeared above them. A purple beam of magic shot out of the purple magic circle and when it hit the ground there was an explosion in a small crater form. Very fast. I see. Your sacred gear gives you the ability to move at high speed. The demon nodded contentedly. He already held a black sword in his hand with purple decorations. He held his sword behind him when Yuki appeared behind him and attacked him. Yuki was pushed back and because of that she jumped back. Naruto got into a fighting stance. What's your name? Naruto wanted to know the name of the demon that he would either call him or get called by himself. Since I am going to call you both, I am going to tell you. He held both arms out to either side. My name is Zolgyr. I hope you remember it well before you die. His sword was engulfed in black flames. Naruto's katana was engulfed in red flames and immediately after that they both charged off. Naruto was now faster than when fighting Nonaka. Nonaka hadn't given everything in the fight against Naruto either. After all, she didn't want to call him, she just wanted to hurt him and then ask him again which side he was on. The swords of both opponents clashed, causing an eruption of red and black fire. Naruto blocked 2 slashes from the demon and then counterattacked. The demon held his sword in front of him and grinned. The red flames and the black flames danced around them as they crossed their blades. Naruto kicked the demon away before suddenly being unable to move. He looked into the demon's eyes, shocked. You're fast and you're good with a sword, but as a simple human you are very susceptible to magic that controls the mind. Zolgyr's eyes were glowing pink, and he went towards Naruto. Naruto couldn't move. His whole body was paralyzed. He was now standing directly in front of Naruto. No worries, I'll take care of the little hero first. I can't call you yet. Otherwise your sacred gear would just find a new owner. Zolgyr grinned slightly and turned away from Naruto. Naruto could only watch helplessly as Zolgyr and Yuki started fighting. She was able to defend herself well, but in the long run Yuki didn't stand a chance against this powerful demon. It wasn't for nothing that he was one of the leaders of a secret organization. Damned. No matter what I do, I can't move. Nonaka must not die here. I don't care if I die, but she can't die. Naruto's eyes filled with anger at himself. He should have trained. He had done nothing to get stronger. That way there would be a higher chance that someone could call him. He hadn't thought that anyone else would be called in the process. Normally he wouldn't care, but not with Nonaka. He had always ignored her as best he could, but she had a life of her own. She couldn't die here because of Naruto's stubbornness. His parents would not forgive him for that. Crap. Naruto internally screamed in anger. His entire body was throbbing. He hated being so weak right now. Unlike Zolgyr, Naruto needed to come out of this paralysis. Yuki had just gotten a cut on her shoulder. Zolgyr could even turn invisible. Naruto's eyes filled with hatred for this demon. He didn't have the right to take Yuki's life. He could take his own life, but not Yuki's. Naruto started radiating a lot of heat. The air around him began to shimmer. The heat increased as Zolgyr and Yuki fought. Yuki created an arc of green energy, negating a magic attack from Zolgyr. Her katana was surrounded by cherry blossom petals and right after she attacked Zolgyr, Zolgyr's sword was surrounded by the black flames and with it he countered Yuki's attack. You are strong little hero. I would have liked to make you my own, but unfortunately you must die. I don't have the time to make you my slave right now. His eyes shone pink and right after that Yuki couldn't move as well as before. She could just dodge a magic attack and then look at Naruto. Zolgyr also looked at Naruto. The air around Naruto shimmered and his blonde hair looked like it was on fire. Naruto had his eyes closed. His katana lay on the floor beside him. Naruto opened his eyes and then he said, I accept the terms. Immediately thereafter, the katana flew into his hand and his entire body was engulfed in red flames. The fire around his blade reappeared, and this time the entire area was engulfed in an inferno. Zolgyr's eyes widened at the sight of this power. It was majestic. A human could engulf an entire area in an inferno. It was burning everywhere. Naruto, Zolgyr and Yuki were surrounded by the raging inferno. Naruto raised his katana and said balance break, longsword of the remnant flame. Zolgyr had created a strong barrier around the zone and so no one outside the barrier could feel the extreme heat. Yuki didn't seem concerned. Naruto could control who is affected by his flames and heat. He obviously didn't want Yuki to die, and she would if Naruto let her feel the heat too, at least in this specific situation. The fire around Naruto's body exploded outward, spreading in all directions like an eruption of fire. A tall pillar of fire rose around Naruto, dispelling the clouds in the sky. All you could see were flames. Zolgyr had created a barrier around himself and because of that he didn't get burned alive. Yuki stood in this inferno herself and still she didn't get any damage. The ground beneath Naruto's feet began to melt from the intense heat. He started walking towards Zolgyr. He took one step at a time, and as he did so the eruption of fire calmed down a bit. The fire was now raging around the three people. It looked like an arena. Naruto's body was still engulfed in red flames. He pushed off and just before he got to Zolgyr, he swung his sword. Heaven and earth end in ashes. Naruto unleashed a massive wave of extremely hot flames. Zolgyr tried to fight back, but it was too late. He was engulfed in these extremely hot flames, and even with the barrier he was taking a lot of damage. After 2 minutes all the flames disappeared and Zolgyr was revealed. His entire body was producing smoke. He was on one knee and panting heavily. He couldn't believe how strong this sacred gear was. A simple human managed to inflict such severe injuries on him. Even a fallen angel with 10 wings would have trouble against Zolgyr. What is this sacred gear? Is there another Longinus? Zolgyr looked at Naruto with one eye open. He had just noticed. But something was different than before. All the flames were gone. Be it the flames raging around the 3 people or the flames around Naruto's sword and Naruto himself. Naruto concentrated the intense flames of the sword along the edge of the blade. It neither burned nor erupted, but anything it touched was eradicated to nothingness. The katana now looked like an ancient and worn-out katana, severely scorched by fire. Naruto charged off and disappeared shortly. He appeared right in front of Zolgyr, swinging his katana, Rising Sun Edge. Zolgyr just barely managed to dodge it, however, his cloak was simply cut in 2. Naruto then raised his katana and made a downward swing. Zolgyr gritted his teeth and tried to dodge to the side, but it didn't help. Naruto's sword went through his body like butter. Zolgyr gave Naruto a confused look because he didn't feel anything anymore. Yuki watched as Zolgyr first split in 2 and then simply dissolved into nothing. Naruto's sword hit the ground lightly with the slash, creating a massive fissure that ran far into the distance. She couldn't believe what Naruto had just done. He alone had won against this powerful demon. The floor started to steam because all the heat was gone now. She looked at Naruto in disbelief as he stood there with his katana. He didn't move. The barrier was destroyed when Naruto hit the ground with his katana, creating the massive fissure. It was as if someone had made a deep scar in the earth's crust. She had never seen anyone do such a thing. Naruto's body started to shake and immediately after that he fell sideways and hit the ground. The sun shone down on Naruto. There were no clouds over Kuoh now. Naruto had just evaporated all clouds over Kuoh. Yuki quickly ran to him and rolled him onto his back. Naruto coughed hard once and opened his eyes slightly. "Hey Nonaka, are you alright?" His katana disappeared in a red light. Yuki nodded. "I am fine. How are you Uzumaki?" She looked at him worried. He had saved her life and he was only human. It was usually her duty to protect people as a hero, but in this fight she could do nothing. Naruto smiled slightly. "Well, I am going to die now." He looked up at the sky. He could never have used this technique in his condition. He could only use it by sacrificing all his life force and pouring it into his sacred gear. That was the price for the balance breaker. "What? You're not hurt that badly at all?" Yuki couldn't believe what she heard. Naruto spat blood and coughed a little. He smiled slightly as he looked at Yuki. "Don't worry Nonaka. I've wanted to die for a long time. Now I can finally see my parents again." "No. You mustn't die yet Uzumaki. I still must be able to thank you properly." "Unfortunately, it's too late for that, you know. Up until now I've always ignored everything." He looked into Yuki's yellow eyes. His blue eyes showed life for the first time since Shed known him. He had life in his blue eyes again. "I just wanted to die so I don't have to be in this damn world anymore. I am originally from another world, but in the last few days I just couldn't manage to ignore everyone anymore." Naruto coughed again. Yuki looked at Naruto sadly. Unfortunately, she had no ability to save him. The important people in her life were always taken away from her. First it was Basara and now it's Naruto. Her lifesaver was dying here and once again there was nothing she could do. Had she done the long and hard training for nothing? She really thought she was strong enough now. She had to be rescued again. She wanted to scream in frustration, but she couldn't, not while Naruto was still alive. She listened to him while tears welled up in her eyes. "I am glad I was able to save you, Nonaka." Naruto was looking forward to seeing his parents. Finally, he could be with his family. He probably had enough of this world, but he would miss some people. He slowly closed his eyes with a smile on his face. He was completely ready to face the Shinigami and then be reunited with his parents. Naruto was in a familiar surroundings. When he opened his eyes again, an inferno raged around him. The red flames could be seen everywhere, which Naruto used earlier in the fight against Zolgyr. The earth was black, and the sky was filled with clouds of ash. Naruto couldn't see anything but the red flames. They enclosed him completely and yet Naruto didn't feel any heat or anything. "What am I doing here?" Naruto looked at the flames and waited. He knew something was wrong. He was supposed to die. So why was he here, where he met the spirit of his sacred gear? The spirit in his sacred gear was right in front of him. This massive inferno was the spirit sealed within the katana. The deal was your entire life force for full use of the balance breaker. You didn't use the full power of the balance breaker and you also didn't activate an ability. You are badly injured from using it, but you will survive this time. You can't make that deal with me again, otherwise, you would die when the balance breaker gets activated. The deep voice echoed all around Naruto. He didn't really know what Naruto should think about it. He only made this deal so Yuki wouldn't have to die. He knew himself that he hadn't used all his abilities. He just didn't think he'd survive because of it. He was looking forward to seeing his parents, hell probably be alive for a while. Yuki would not want to call him from now on. Maybe Takagawa would try at some point, and since Naruto couldn't use the balance breaker anymore, the chance of dying was higher than before. If you continue to be human, this situation will remain so. The only way to use the balance breaker again in the future is to become a demon, whether or not is up to you. Naruto frowned. He had no intention of becoming one of the demons. Demons are stronger than humans, and if Naruto were to become a demon, he would have even more trouble finding a strong opponent who was willing to call him and is able to do it. Several people will be addressing you directly in the near future. Your use of the balance breaker has drawn the attention of every being in Kuoh. Naruto just nodded. Naruto's sacred gear wasn't recognized by anyone for nothing. Ever since sacred gears existed, no one had this sacred gear in their hands. So far, this sacred gear hadn't an owner before Naruto. Naruto had often asked his sacred gear why he was chosen by this strong sacred gear. To date he hadn't received an answer. When you wake up, you will wake up in a strange environment. I guess Nonaka took me with her. After all, I told her I was going to die. He sighed. There's no way he was going to have such a quiet life from now on. His display of power as a normal person was just too impressive for that. Thanks Ryujin Jaka. Naruto slowly disappeared from this landscape, and he closed his eyes. He didn't even want to wake up. He just wanted to go back to sleep when he was hurt that badly. Of course, his words weren't heard, and that was why he would have to continue to deal with this world. Whether Naruto liked it or not, his promise to his parents didn't give him another choice. When Naruto woke up 2 days later, he grunted and straightened himself into a sitting position. He closed one eye once and gasped briefly. He could feel every single fiber in his body. Everything still hurt. He opened both eyes and let his gaze wander. He wasn't in his apartment. He knew that much. He could imagine that he was at Nonaka's home. The room was small, about the size of his bedroom. Next to the bed he was lying on there was a desk with a chair in front of it and a wardrobe. On the desk were a lamp and a book. Naruto lifted the covers and could see that his body got patched up and cleaned by someone. This person could only be Nonaka. He looked at the door and then he slowly turned sideways and put his feet on the floor. Every movement caused a pang in his body. He gritted his teeth. He just missed being a Jinchuriku where his injuries would heal directly. He took a deep breath and then stood up. He made a pained face and took a few steps to the window, which was on the other side of the room. He looked out the window and saw that he was somewhere in the outer parts of Kuoh. He walked by here a few times. As it turned out, Yuki liked to live rather remotely. He was a bit distracted, and that's why he didn't hear Yuki come into the room. She gave Naruto a shocked look as he stood at the window and looked out. He only wore orange boxers now. Of course, Yuki already knew Naruto's body. She had completely cleaned and patched him up. She hadn't taken off his boxers of course, but apart from that she knew every part of his body, and that's why all the scars on his body didn't surprise her. She was rather shocked that her lifesaver was awake after 2 days. When she noticed that Naruto didn't die at all after the fight with Zolgear, but only fell unconscious, she was relieved like never before in her life. As it turns out, fate left her this person this time. Basara had already been taken from her. She wouldn't let Naruto come that close to dying again. She owed him more than she could ever repay. She was only alive because of him. Naruto. Naruto heard Yuki's voice and turned around. He saw Yuki's relieved face. She even had a tear in her right eye from relief. At least he was glad that Yuki wasn't injured and was healthy. Hi Nonaka. Naruto looked into Yuki's yellow eyes, and even after all this, his face was blank. He only had some life in his eyes again at the end of the fight because he thought he would finally see his parents again. It was to be expected that he was a bit disappointed when he found out that he wasn't going to die. How are you? She just ignores that fact. She was just relieved that Naruto was still alive. I am pretty wrecked, but I am alive. Naruto went back to the bed and sat down there. I have informed the school that you will not come for a few days. Relax here. No demon will find you here or anyone else. Yuki saw Naruto's body twitch with every movement. He seemed to be in real pain. Naruto nodded his approval and laid back down. Why was he just lying here? Everything hurted him and he really had no nerve to go to himself. It was also not so bad to sleep in a bed with a pillow and blanket when you're feeling like shit. The mattress on the bed was also softer than his own. He had made a mental note to get at least one other mattress when he got back to his apartment. I'll get you something to drink and then I'll leave you alone. Yuki went to the door, and when she opened the door, she looked at Naruto again. Thanks, Naruto. Naruto had already turned sideways, and so he had to look over his shoulder. I am only alive because of you. I'll never forget that. Naruto nodded and looked ahead again and closed his eyes. He's tired and everything hurts, he just wanted to sleep right now. It had been 3 days since Naruto accepted Yuki's offer and recovered in her house. He didn't do anything besides sleep, his body wasn't used to such great power. It never took him so long to recover from something. Even after his fight with Kakuzu, where his arm was injured by his Rasen Shuriken, he was back on his feet in 2 days. It had been 5 days in total and Naruto was still not back to full strength. He was lying on the bed, thinking. Yuki visited him from time to time. She told him what's new at school, but he didn't care about all that stuff. Yuki wanted to talk to him, and that's why she told him everything. He only really listened when it came to Issei. Aside from Takagawa, Issei was the only guy Naruto was paying any attention to. Yuki assured Naruto every day that he could just relax and no demon would show up here. Once he would be back in school, many demons would try to get him on their side. He knew that much, and that's why he was thinking the whole time how he would be going to take care of this shit. There were several ways he could respond to these things. He could, as usual, just ignore and avoid all the demons, but eventually they would use other methods to confront him. He didn't know how Issei became a demon. He couldn't imagine how something like that should work. He wanted to ask Yuki how a human became a demon, but so far, he hadn't the opportunity. Whenever he brought up the subject, Yuki immediately changed the subject. He really didn't know why Yuki avoided his question so much. It's just a normal question that interested him. If he knew how a person became a demon, then he could actively do something about it. If you knew the method, you could take countermeasures. He looked sideways and narrowed his eyes. It was short again, but he could feel an aura of a demon. It was like someone was looking for something around here. Naruto could imagine that the demon was looking for him. But that's not certain. After all, Naruto didn't know what demons do. He didn't want to know either. He turned away and closed his eyes. He was getting tired again, so he tried to go back to sleep. He just hoped that he would finally start dreaming about Konoha again. He hadn't even dreamed of Konoha since the fight with Zolgear. Naruto really wondered why he stopped dreaming about Konoha. After all, he could see all his friends there. He frowned and banished those thoughts. He just kept trying until he dreamed of Konoha again. He couldn't do anything else now. Candlelight illuminated a room. The window in the room was covered by a curtain. In the middle of the room was a big carpet, and on it was a wooden table. On the table was a tablecloth, and on the tablecloth was a tray with a pot and 2 cups on it. There were couches on either side of the table. Each couch looked like it was from an old century. In front of the table was a desk, which was made by a master. The processing of the wood and the engravings were clearly not the work of a normal craftsman. On the walls of the room were several pictures of landscapes, people, animals, and other works of art. In the corner of the room was a shower stall which was lined with a white and black curtain. Right next to the large door were 2 cabinets made of fine wood. No one would guess that this room was in the old school building of the Kuoh Academy grounds. Unlike any other room in the exterior of the old school building, this room was very classy and decorative. How's your new servant doing? Sona Citri was the heiress of the Citri clan, taking the position since her older sister, Seraphal Leviathan, who became one of the 4 great Satans. As such, she was the youngest daughter of Lord Citri and Lady Citri. Sona was a spectacular young woman with a slim figure, black hair styled in a short bob cut, and violet eyes. She was usually seen dressed in the Kuoh Academy girls' school uniform. He's learning, but he's just getting started. Rias took a sip from her cup and then looked into her rival's eyes. She had known Sona since she was a child. Both were in charge of Kuoh, with Rias in charge at night and Sona at daytime. Is there any new information about the cause? To this day, no one knew exactly who fought on the mountain. When Sona and Rias showed up with their servants, there was no one to be found. No one noticed anything about the fight until the end. It was quite unusual how such a fight could happen under everyone's radar. The entire mountain was steaming as if the rocks were cooling down, and there was of course the massive fissure running off into the distance. It was as if someone had punched a scar into the earth's crust. You could clearly see where the fissure was created. From that point the fissure got bigger and bigger until it stayed at a certain size and width. Someone must have put up a very strong barrier to keep a fight of this magnitude undetectable. No, we were able to put everything back in order, but who fought there is still unclear. There were signs of the use of fire. The stones and rocks all had some ash on them and black marks. Sona looked into her cup. That someone of that strength could live in Kuoh undetected was a problem. One could only hope now that this person didn't become the enemy of the two. That would be a big problem. But fire can be used by many. Anyone who can use magic is able to create fire. How strong is another question. But theoretically many are possible. It's just unclear how this huge fissure was produced. Tsubaki and I had to use all our powers to close the fissure again. Sona adjusted her glasses once. Have you actually seen Naruto Uzumaki in the last few days? Everyone knew that Naruto was always absent from school for a day, but the wearer of the strong sacred gear had never disappeared for so long in a row. It was almost like he wasn't coming to school anymore. Nobody knew where he lived. Sona and Rias had tried to follow him with their familiars, but he always managed to escape. If someone tried to speak to him directly, he just ignored you or walked away. He didn't even look at Sona or Rias most of the time, he just walked past them. Since there were always many fans of the two in the area, they couldn't follow him. The fans always addressed Sona or Rias. Sona didn't have nearly as many fans as Rias, of course, but it was enough of a distraction. He seemed to be doing this on purpose. No, but where you mention his name, could it be that he fought in that place? Sona wasn't there in person, but Rias told her about the fight in the park. There, Rias had seen with her own eyes how Naruto simply called the fallen angel. She remembered that Naruto could also control fire with his sacred gear. That's what Rias reported. It could be, of course, but you couldn't make that scar in the earth's crust with fire alone. I've thought of that possibility, but it wouldn't be possible for a human to create that fissure, even with a sacred gear, which apparently allows him to move quickly and control fire. It just wouldn't make sense. Even Issei, who possesses a Longinus class sacred gear, couldn't muster such a power. Issei was also a demon, and he could hardly generate power-ups with his boosted gear. He still had a lot of training to do, so he could do multiple power-ups and get stronger. So far, he was still her weakest servant. However, it's strange that since that fight, Naruto hasn't appeared again. Rias couldn't ignore that fact. Maybe he was involved in the fight. It's not even clear who fought who. It could be that Naruto got into a fight between two opponents and had to defend himself. You're right. We should try to find him again. Yes, it's time we used some harsher methods to make him the offer. They both agreed that no one would fight over Naruto. Should Naruto accept the offer from either of them, the other person would accept and support that decision. Sona nodded and adjusted her glasses again. I have one more piece of news. There is said to be a spy at our school. She had recently received a message from her parents. A spy from the Demon Lord faction should have come to Kuoh. Rias narrowed her eyes. A spy? She wouldn't allow a spy to lurk in her domain. From the Demon Lord faction, Sona raised her hand and immediately thereafter a blue magic circle appeared over her palm. An image of a flag appeared above the magic circle. What does a spy from this faction do in the human world? The Demon Lord faction and the Moderate faction normally stays in the demon world. It would be a problem if these two factions were suddenly also interested in humans. The Gremory and their allies had no treaties with either of these factions. That meant there were no peace treaties or anything like that either. No one knew exactly how strong the demons from these factions were. We don't know that. We can't say exactly who it is. None of my servants have discovered anything strange so far. Sona took a sip of her tea and then looked back at Rias. I don't have time to worry about things like that. She was running out of time. The date of the wedding was approaching and so far, Rias didn't have the strength to fight Riser. Her new servant had to become much stronger and that in a short time. Otherwise she would be locked in a cage forever. She would do anything to finally be free. Her only wish at the moment was to be really free, but for that she needs strength, power that she only got from new servants. She already got a method to make Issei stronger, but she would need 1 or 2 servants more for the fight, which would come in the near future. Demons were creatures that always seek their own advantage. It was the nature of demons. They weren't the antagonists of the angels for nothing. They lived according to their lusts and desires. I'll let you know if I learn anything new on this subject. Rias nodded and took a sip of her tea. Rias and Sona talked some more and then Sona walked out of the room leaving Rias alone. The two had such meetings once a week so that they could exchange information. Why are you following me? Naruto looked over his shoulder. Behind him was Yuki in her school uniform. 2 more days had passed, and he had recovered fully. He was on his way to his apartment, but he was being followed by Yuki. I want to know where you live. Naruto sighed. He had learned one thing during the week he was with Yuki. Once Yuki wanted something, she wouldn't stop until she got it. She now calls him Naruto instead of Uzumaki. You should know that I don't want anyone to know where I live. Yuki just stared at him. Naruto looked up at the sky and asked again, why don't you save me from this? He looked straight ahead and kept walking. He couldn't just disappear like that because Yuki could just follow him. With her power as a hero, she was fast enough to pursue him, even if he used the flash step. Hey Naruto. What? He seemed annoyed, but Yuki didn't care. You haven't answered my question yet. Naruto stopped and looked over his shoulder. He mentioned that he was from another world where he was about to die. Yuki hadn't realized it at first and that's why she didn't realize it from the beginning. She had often asked him what world he came from and who he really was. Naruto just ignored these questions. He didn't want to talk about it, and he hadn't even dreamed of Konoha one time since the fight with Zolgyr. He wasn't happy about it. Up until now it was enough for him to dream of his homeland, and that's how he was somehow able to endure this world. But now he hadn't even seen Sakura, Kakashi, Tsunade, Jiraiya or anyone else. You know my answer, Nonaka. Naruto looked forward again and kept walking. Yuki just kept walking after Naruto. In the end she didn't care where Naruto lived, she didn't want to leave him alone right now. He was the target of many supernatural beings, especially after fighting Zolgyr. Zolgyr may have created a barrier, which was why the use of Naruto's balance breaker was kept a secret, but the scar Naruto had carved into the earth's crust wasn't disguised. Eventually it would come out who fought there. She had already sent a message to the village and in the reply said that she would get support from other heroes. She didn't know yet who was coming, but that wasn't important. So far, Kuoh had always been peaceful, and that's why Yuki always managed everything on her own. But she couldn't take on demons like Zolgyr alone. If it wasn't for Naruto, she would be dead now. For several weeks the activities of demons, fallen angels and other races have increased. She would need the help in the future. After all, it was her job to protect humans from demons and fallen angels, but for that she had to be able to defeat these beings. Hi, Naru-kai. Naruto and Yuki stopped as both heard the voice. Naruto frowned. He turned to the person and saw Takagawa. He walked towards Naruto and Yuki with a happy smile. What are you doing here, Takagawa? I've just come out of that shop over there. Takagawa pointed to a building. There was a store for manga, light novels or stuff like that. There weren't many of them in Kuoh, and this store always gave Takagawa the specimens he couldn't get from other stores. Yuki just watched as Naruto and Takagawa talked. She always sensed something odd about Takagawa before, but she couldn't say anything specific until now. She didn't know if he was a human with a sacred gear or a demon. Until she was sure, she would remain vigilant. So, you had something going on with Nonaka after all. I knew it. You were a Casanova Naru-kai. You know as well as I do that's not true, Takagawa. Nonaka is interested in someone else. Naruto hoped so. At least, he didn't want Yuki to feel anything for him. That would make everything more complicated. Oh Naru-kai, you just don't understand women. She doesn't talk to any other boys but you. Now I even meet you guys together outside of class. Takagawa looked at Yuki and then back at Naruto. What have you been doing here, Naru-kai? We happened to run into each other. Then you definitely have some time to come with me, don't you Naru-kai? Yuki narrowed her eyes but didn't say anything. She should act in haste now. She didn't know if Takagawa was a human or a demon. If he was a human, then she couldn't hurt him. Naruto sighed. All right, he looked at Yuki. See you, Nonaka. See you, Naruto. Yuki gave a little bow, then turned around and started walking away from the two. Naruto and Takagawa started walking together and Naruto asked, so, what do you really want, Takagawa? His gaze was serious and focused. He knew Takagawa had watched the fight. He hadn't realized it until the end where he had won against Zolgyr. You know it, don't you, Naru-kai? He continued to smile, but the otherwise carefree voice now sounded more serious and menacing. You are a demon. I have no idea what you all want from me. I just want to be left alone. Naruto and Yujiro stopped. They had gone to a park. Naruto briefly saw the landscape appear to curve slightly before returning to normal. The people around them just disappeared and now Naruto and Takagawa were alone. Do you want to fight me now too? Naruto's body stayed relaxed. If Yujiro wanted to call him, he would welcome it. He probably wouldn't stand a chance against him. After all, he was unable to use his balance breaker and Takagawa's power was almost as great as Zolgyr's. I didn't want to fight you Naru-kai. Takagawa took a few steps towards Naruto. I wanted to say thank you. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Why would Takagawa want to thank him? I don't remember helping you, Takagawa. You have granted me my greatest wish. Takagawa turned and looked up at the sky. I watched the fight between you and Nonaka. He looked over his shoulder, his pupils becoming slides. I've been after a demon for a long time. That special demon had always been out of my reach. I could never take care of this demon because I had responsibilities, and I am bound to my master. Because of this bond, I was never able to actively do anything. But you gave me the opportunity to take advantage of the situation and finish off the bastard with my own hands. Takagawa turned to Naruto and raised his hand. A purple magic circle appeared over his hand. A hologram of Zolgyr's body was shown there without a head. The head laid next to the body. Naruto raised an eyebrow. He could still remember how his last attack wiped Zolgyr out of existence. Zolgyr simply disintegrated after being cut in two by Naruto's sword. When Zolgyr interrupted your and Nonaka's fight and you both fought him, I made some preparations in the rare event that you might defeat him. A magic circle appeared on the ground next to Takagawa, and above him appeared in a puff of smoke a copy of Zolgear. I can create dummies of others with my magic. I exchanged one of these dummies for the real Zolgear at the last moment. So, you didn't call the real Zolgear, you just called one of my dummies. The dummy dissolved again, and Naruto looked at Takagawa again. There's even a magic you can use to make shadow clones. Naruto still didn't understand what Takagawa wanted from him. I gave Zolgear the calling blow. He lowered his hand, and as he did so, the hologram and magic circle above his hand disappeared. That demon murdered the foster parents who raised me. Naruto understood now. It looked like Zolgear called Takagawa's foster parents. Since Zolgear was a strong demon and apparently also in a high position, Takagawa didn't get to him easily. He was also bound to some master, so he couldn't take direct action. The fight between Naruto, Yuki and Zolgear was probably a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Takagawa wanted to call Zolgear with his own hands. Naruto could understand that from this narration. There's only the question of why Takagawa was telling him all this. I kind of understood how I helped you, but what do you want from me now, Takagawa? You know very well that I just want my peace. A thank you would have been enough at school, and if you want to do me a favor, just leave me alone. You should stop being so ignorant, Narukai. Takagawa looked straight into Naruto's blue eyes. I don't care about the reasons why you're like this. Someone with your eyes should know that eventually the calm will end. You have the blood of thousands on your fingers just like me. Naruto narrowed his eyes. If you keep going like this, you'll die soon enough. Naruto shrugged. I want to die, so that's not the problem. You just want be alone. Others will also die because of you. He knew it well enough himself. Takagawa had already lost a lot in his past because he was so ignorant. He recognized himself in Naruto when he was in his depression. It's time Naruto accepted reality again. I know that myself. Naruto closed his eyes and rubbed his temples a little. He experienced it firsthand in the fight against Zolgear. Even if he didn't want it, many people wanted to be close to him, and sooner or later they would be in danger if such a strong opponent appeared again. Then pull yourself together, Narukai. I would be willing to be your first ally because I still owe you something. Naruto looked at Takagawa. His eyes showed that he wasn't lying. Even if I owe you, you could just call me. So, what's the real reason, Takagawa? I was once at a point in my life where I was just like you. I lost a lot and I regret it. Today I wish someone had shown up and pulled me back to reality. Naruto remained silent. He had seen the reality. He didn't like the fact himself, but he couldn't help it. He never wanted to come into this world. Why should he accept this reality? You can't do everything alone. That's why there are friends and allies who help one. They make sure you don't forget why you're there. Naruto's eyes widened slightly when he heard those words from Takagawa. He had heard the exact same words before. It was back then in the fight against Itachi Uchiha. There Itachi had said the same words. Naruto looked down at himself. He raised both his hands and looked at them. He was silent and just stood there with his hands in the line of sight of his eyes. He made a fist with both hands and closed his eyes. He opened his eyes and let his hands fall to his side again. I see you've made your choice, Narukai. Takagawa recognized it immediately. He had done the same thing back then when he realized something. Naruto looked at Takagawa. All right, Takagawa. I accept your offer. He held out his hand to Takagawa and he took it. They sealed the deal with a handshake. I already have something that might cheer you up, Narukai. Naruto raised an eyebrow. He didn't like that look on his face. That expression was malicious. What? It'll help you find a reason. Takagawa took 2 steps away and stood with his back to Naruto. He looked up at the sky. After that he looked over his shoulder and looked at Naruto. A reason to live again. Just because Naruto accepted Takagawa, it didn't make everything all right. Naruto didn't show any feelings even towards Takagawa. Although he could sense how similar the two are, Naruto would need a reason to start living properly again. The sun pleased every person in Kuoh. It was a beautiful day, and many had smiles on their faces. Today was Friday, which meant that today was also the last day of school for the week. Many Kuoh Academy students were looking forward to the weekend, and Naruto was no different. He had no commitments or other things at the weekend. He could do whatever he wanted. That had been the case before. He looked into Hasegawa's green eyes and thought he had misheard. Never in her life would this woman ask him something like that, right? What was that? Naruto had an encounter with Sona Citri earlier today. As he thought, she wanted to see him. He knew he couldn't run away so easily now. After all, he was responsible for the scar in the Earth's crust, and the demons must have found out long ago that it was him. He was supposed to come to the student council office after school, but back to the topic, he looked into the eyes of the most desirable woman in the entire school. Her face never changed. Do you have time on the weekend? I wanted to eat something with you, Uzumaki. As before, her face didn't change, no flinching, no smiling or anything, she kept her serious face the whole time. May I ask why you're asking a student to go out to dinner with you on the weekends? You will certainly not ask because of the first reason. Why someone would ask such a question. Chisato nodded. I am meeting up with an old friend and he wanted to get to know you. I am sure you would get along with him, Uzumaki. Naruto could understand such an explanation. He wondered what she meant for an old friend. Anyone else as strong as she perhaps? He actually planned to train at the weekend. He never trained in this world before. He couldn't afford to ignore everyone and everything anymore. He had put it off a bit, but in the end the fight had opened his eyes. Takagawa had made him accept it. Even as a human, he could get stronger. Of course, he would always be at a disadvantage against demons, heroes, fallen angels or angels. Despite this, he had finally understood that he had to start training his body again. There were many strong potential opponents, and he must be prepared for them. He had already spoken to his sacred gear. There were ways he could specifically train the techniques of his sacred gear. For example, he could continue to train the flash step and master it more and more. This would make him faster and he could cover greater distances in record time. He also wondered what Takagawa had in store for him. He had at least told him that he would give him a reason to live. So far, Takagawa hadn't reported back. The guy was also absent for 2 days and didn't show up at school. He was with his master or something if Naruto remembered correctly. A lot of students are currently asking me how they should behave when eating with the opposite. I've already invited my old friend to ask this question, but it would also be good to have a boy's perspective your age. Chisato adjusted her glasses once. Naruto sighed. He didn't exactly know why, but he had a feeling that he should accept this offer. Alright. I will go with you to the meeting, Ms. Hasegawa. I am just warning you. I am not the best at this kind of thing. It would be better if you would ask someone else. My old friend wanted to meet you specifically and that's why I asked you, Uzumaki. She looked at the clock in the hospital room and then she looked back at Naruto. I have a student to take care of now. I'll text you the details later. Naruto nodded and turned around. He went to the door and opened it. He looked at Chisato again and then shook his head. He walked out of the infirmary and then walked down the corridor to his classroom. School wasn't going to last much longer, so he went to class. From there it was only a stone's throw to the office of the student council. Once he talked to Sona, he could go to his training. When he got to his classroom, several students looked at him. Naruto raised an eyebrow as everyone's eyes met him. He walked past all the tables and when he got to the last row he went to his seat. 2 minutes later Yuki came into the classroom and saw Naruto. She went straight to him. Hi Naruto. Naruto looked at Yuki and nodded. Hi Nonaka. Both looked into each other's eyes before Yuki spoke again. Everything okay? Yes, I am fine. Yuki nodded contentedly with a slight smile. She sat down and then turned in her chair to face Naruto. What did Takagawa want? Naruto considered what to tell her. She didn't seem to know he was a demon. There must be a reason why Takagawa didn't reveal himself. He was just talking to me about something. It wasn't anything important. A new barbecue was opening, and he had asked me if we could go there together. After that we said goodbye. He just shrugged and looked out the window. His face was blank as usual. Naruto's phone vibrated in his pocket. Naruto grabbed his phone and pulled it out. He unlocked the screen and saw that he had received a text message from Takagawa. Saturday night in the park. Prepare yourself, it could get uncomfortable. He raised an eyebrow. What's Takagawa up to? I hope this guy doesn't drag me into anything here. He locked his screen again and put the phone in his pocket. Before Yuki could ask anything, Mr. Sakazaki walked into the class and started the lesson. The class wasn't exciting. Naruto spent most of his time looking out the window or sleeping. When the bell for class rang, Naruto woke up and rubbed both his eyes once. He picked up his bag and got up from his seat. He felt 2 pairs of eyes on him, as he thought. Yuki looked directly at him, but Mio also looked at Naruto. He raised an eyebrow and looked at Mio. She seemed annoyed with something. He really didn't know why, but he should better stay away from her. He couldn't get rid of Yuki no matter how hard he would try it. Too much happened for that. If Mio were to come into his life as well, it would be completely over with the little freedom he still had. Since the fight with Zolgir, he hardly had a free minute. The problem with Mio would be that he just couldn't ignore her. She just looked too much like several people he knew and loved. He went off and wanted to get out of the classroom. He could already sense someone outside the class waiting. He hoped that Yuki wouldn't see him doing it. After all, he would now meet with several demons. As he was in the corridor, he sensed the presence of a demon at the end of the corridor. He went to the person and could see that this wasn't Sona. It was her vice president Tsubaki Shinra. Tsubaki was a young bespectacled woman with long straight black hair that extended all the way down to her knees, with split bangs and heterochromic eyes, with a violet left eye and a light brown right eye. In addition to wearing the Kuoh Academy Girls' School uniform, she also wore blue, semi-rimmed glasses with square lenses. Uzumaki-san, please follow me. Tsubaki turned and went ahead. Naruto just went after her and stayed silent. He had a certain idea of what Sona Citri wanted from him. He would turn down the offer if his guess was right. Half an hour later, Naruto walked out the door of the student council office. As he thought, Sona Citri wanted to turn him into a demon. He made it clear straight away that he wasn't interested. As you'd expect, Sona always stayed calm and tried to retry the offer with a few arguments. No matter how good all those arguments were, Naruto didn't want to. He was just glad that he had his peace now. He looked around and saw a few students. He frowned and started walking. He wanted to disappear with the flash step so he could get to his apartment faster. As he walked through the corridors of the school building, all the students ignored him. Some made extra room for him. Everyone dared not speak to him, not with his face, which was always stoic and didn't show any emotion. This face was uncanny for many. He seemed like a shadow walking through the corridors. He sometimes just appeared, although a second ago the students were still looking at his position and he wasn't there before. Something was wrong with Naruto Uzumaki and every student was afraid of him. At least the humans, demons or other supernatural beings at this school found him more interesting than scary. Hi Naruto. Naruto stopped and saw Issei. He hadn't heard from Issei for a few days. He looked the same as usual, but somehow, he also seemed slightly stressed. Hi Issei. How are you doing? I haven't seen you in a long time. He gasped a little because he had been training with someone else before. His boss said that Issei needed to get stronger and that's what he intended to do. After all, he wanted to be the greatest harem king. I am fine. Naruto saw straight away that Issei was training. His aura seemed slightly stronger than the aura he had at the park. Naruto didn't even know if it was normal to be able to roughly guess how strong someone was by sensing their aura. All he knew was that he had this ability. Say Naruto, do you have some time? Naruto raised an eyebrow. What did Issei want from him? I wanted to go home now. Issei, I have to do something. Naruto already turned around. But Issei said wait please, it won't take long either. Naruto frowned. Did Rias Gremory send you? Naruto looked Issei straight in the eye and when he saw his reaction his suspicions were confirmed. Tell Rias Gremory I have no interest in becoming a demon. I just told Sona Citri that I am not interested, especially not if I become a servant in the process. Issei looked a bit shocked. He didn't even know Naruto knew about demons. He always thought that Naruto was just a normal person. Of course, there were rumors about Naruto, but he still thought Naruto was a normal person. Can you come with me anyway? Otherwise, I'll get in trouble. Issei had disappointed Rias several times in the last few days, and he didn't want to disappoint her with such a simple task. If he couldn't do that, how does he intend to become the greatest harem king? He had to make it. Alright. The guy was just like Jiraiya sometimes. When he ran out of money back then, Jiraiya was always begging for money too. Naruto always ended up giving him something so Jiraiya could get drunk again while having the company of a woman. Of course, Jiraiya only ever had Tsunade in his heart, but he still enjoyed his life. That included alcohol and women. They both walked off and only chatted lightly. Issei told Naruto about his new life as a demon and his goal to become the greatest harem king. He is not treated like a slave, but he still must carry out orders, just like a shinobi. It really seems like a similar system, but as a shinobi you were not tied to one lord. You had a duty to the village and not to a single person. Naruto continued to listen. He already learned a few things from Sona, but learning what life would be like as a fresh demon from the perspective of a servant like Issei was something else. 10 minutes later both were in the room where previously Rias and Sona had been drinking tea and exchanging information. Naruto looked around and had to say that this room had more style than the student council office. It seemed appropriate for Rias Gremory. She also always exuded an aura of elegance and dignity. Hello Naruto-kun. I am glad you're finally visiting our club. Right next to the couch was the second super lady of the school. Akeno Himejima was a natural Japanese beauty. Akeno was a beautiful young woman with a voluptuous figure, very long black hair and violet eyes. Her hair was usually tied in a long ponytail, reaching all the way down to her legs with two strands sticking out from the top and sloping backward, with an orange ribbon keeping it in place. Her breasts were larger than Rias' breasts and that meant something. Rias already had large breasts, but the breasts of Akeno were a bit larger. She had, as usual, a smile on her angelic face. When Issei first met her, he got a nosebleed. She was the perfect Japanese beauty for many. Hello Himejima. Naruto's face didn't change even though there was such a beauty in front of him. He also knew that this was a demon in front of him and not a normal person. Despite knowing what was about to happen, Naruto remained wary of demons, even if he made the deal with Takagawa. It didn't mean he trusted him 100%, it could still be that Takagawa was just taking advantage of him. All of that will show up in the future. Hello Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto looked at the desk and saw Rias Gremory. She stood in front of the desk and leaned against it. She had a seductive smile on her face. Sona didn't have the personality or looks like Rias to seduce someone like that. Rias had often used her beauty to wrap someone around her finger. At least it had worked for Issei, although he was a special case because he would have said yes to any woman with large breasts. Rias Gremory, he bowed slightly to remain polite. He had done the same with Sona Citri. Sit down. We were just about to play games. There were some card games, board games and other things on the table. Naruto raised an eyebrow. He hadn't expected anything like this. He thought that he would now get an offer like before from Sona Citri. He sat down next to the other man in the room. Yuto Kiba sat on the couch with a smile on his face the whole time. He had been quiet until now and now he introduced himself. Hello Uzumaki-san. My name is Yuto Kiba. Hi Kiba. Naruto nodded once. Yuto had trouble making male friends. Even Issei still didn't like him that much, even though the two are now part of the same family. Yuto had tried to talk to Naruto several times, but he just ignored him. After all, he was one of the most popular students and Naruto didn't want anything to do with them. Yuto was a handsome young man with short blonde hair, blue eyes and a mole underneath his left eye. He wore the Kuoh Academy boys' school uniform, which consisted of a black blazer with white accents over a white, long-sleeved dress shirt with a black ribbon on the collar, matching black pants, and brown dress shoes. Akeno, Issei and Rias were sitting on the other couch. Naruto could tell how happy Issei was at this situation. He seemed to be exactly where he wanted to be here. I would be in favor of playing a round of cards first, after that we can see what we play. Rias picked up a deck of cards and then snapped her fingers. The other games disappeared into a red magic circle that appeared on the table. So, you can also use magic to store things in a kind of in-between dimension. This is how it looked for Naruto. Okay. I am going to win this round. Everyone held 5 cards after Yuto dealt the cards. Issei laid down a card and then it was Rias' turn. The 5 people played several games for an hour and Naruto was confused. Rias Gremory hadn't made an offer or made hints about her true intention. So far, he only seemed invited to play with the people in the room. He was alerted but enjoyed the games somewhat. It was surprisingly refreshing to do something like this again with a few people. Naruto placed a card and then his phone vibrated. Excuse me. Naruto stood up and pulled the phone out of his pocket. He got a text message from Chisato and there were the details of where and when to be. As it turned out, a new barbecue had opened in town. He had only made up this excuse for Yuki because he couldn't think of anything better at the moment, but as it seemed, there was really a new barbecue what opened just a few days ago. I have to go now. I have to do something. No problem, Naruto-kun. It made me happy that you finally came to visit us. Akeno had that sweet smile on her face. Men can melt from, on Issei. This smile worked 100%. We were happy Naruto. We would be happy if you came by again. We would like to play something with you again. Rias had her slightly seductive smile on her face the whole time. It was fun Uzumaki-san. Yuto smiled and nodded once. We're glad you managed to visit. I told you our club is the best, Naruto. Issei pointed at Naruto, smirking smugly. Naruto said goodbye and then left the room. When Naruto was out of the room and 2 minutes passed, Akeno asked a question to her boss and best friend. Tell Rias, was it really the right decision not to ask him to join our club? Normally the plan had been to make him the offer today, but Rias had given everyone new orders just before he showed up. No. I watched the negotiation between Sona and Naruto with my familiar. He would have said no straight away no matter what we would have said. We must gain his trust first and he must want it from himself, otherwise, he would never say yes. Rias had devised a different strategy. Seduction is useless with Naruto. He had a blank face the whole time, although he had sometimes smiled slightly during games where, for example where Issei had to draw 8 cards and complained. She had tried to get a reaction from him before, but he just didn't react to women. It was almost as if Naruto had no feelings, but today she had seen signs of normal feelings. It might take a while, but she thinks she had the right strategy. You must gain his trust first and if he shows more feelings then Rias could also try to seduce him, but it would take some time until then. She had received a message from Grafia today that the wedding had been postponed 6 months because Searsex wanted it that way. This gave Rias more time and that's why she wasn't so stressed anymore. It was the best news she could ever get today. This meant that she would have enough time to get Naruto on her side and with the power of her servant she would break off this engagement in 6 months. She was in good spirits. I see. Akano smiled and stood up. She needed to make new tea again and sweets for Kaneko. Kaneko was with one of her clients right now, so she couldn't be here. Have you heard anything from Zolgir yet? A figure in a black robe could be seen above a magical spell circle, in a dark room. Several magic circles were visible in a circular formation, and above each magic circle was a hologram of a different person wearing the same black robes. The individual identities couldn't be recognized because the black robe also slightly covered the faces. No, so far there is no sign of Zolgir. This man has been away from his residence for a few days several times lately, but it has now been 2 weeks, said another character. We're about to move into Phase 2 and Zolgir was the key. Without him we can't start Phase 2 of our plan. The voice sounded annoyed and irritated. You're right. It's imperative that we find out where he is and what happened to him. I have a feeling a new enemy has emerged and gotten wind of our cause. The largest character spoke, and the other characters looked at the large character. Send someone to the human world and look for him there. I have a feeling he was looking for something there. He had already hinted that there was something in the human world that interested him. As you wish, Leader Sama. One of the figures spoke and bowed. The figure's hologram disappeared and so did the magic circle. The others stand ready. Due to the delay of Phase 2, we must be more careful from now on. Lord Leahard is getting closer and closer, and we have to prevent that. All holograms vanished after the leader dismissed them. The leader opened his eyes and looked out of the window from his residence. He overlooked a large terrain of the demon world. His eyes are narrowed and focused. Whoever is disturbing our plans will pay. The air around him began to flicker from the intense power from that man. Naruto already saw the restaurant where he was supposed to meet Chisato and someone else. He was only briefly at his apartment to put his bag down there. After that he just walked out in his school clothes. He walked quite normally because he had enough time. He sensed some strong signatures in the city. There used to be one that was on the outskirts of town. That signature felt like the signature of one of those crow people. This person was definitely stronger than Zolgir. Then there was the extremely strong signature that was by Chisato in the restaurant. The person was at least as strong as the crowman. This person was clearly a hero. Naruto could feel that. So Chisato's old friend is a hero like Yuki. She had hinted about another hero coming to Kuoh for her help. It looks like this hero has already arrived. With that person by Yuki's side, she won't have any problems in the future. The hero's aura was madness. Naruto saw someone coming out of the restaurant. In front of the restaurant, many people were standing and smoking cigarettes or talking. The man stood a little apart and lit a cigarette. He was a tall, slim man with long, brown hair, eyes and glasses. He was wearing a white shirt and gray pants. When Naruto got to all the people, the man looked at him. He smiled slightly and raised his hand. Naruto went to the man. So you are Naruto. I've heard a lot about you, brat. The man grinned slightly and then puffed on his cigarette. He blew the smoke out into the world, eyeing Naruto slightly. My name is Jin. It's my pleasure. He held out his hand to Naruto. Naruto shook Jin's hand and nodded. Wow. You showing no emotion isn't an understatement. Jin let go of Naruto's hand and gave him a sympathetic look. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Chisato already warned me, but you've really been through a lot, huh? Jin scratched his side and thought about something. He drew on his cigarette again and then blew the smoke out into the world. You're pretty easygoing for your strength. There aren't many that go easy on your strength and enjoy life, of course. That's exactly how Naruto was back then. Before he landed in this world, he was the strongest person on the planet next to Sasuke. Nobody was stronger than Naruto or Sasuke at the end of the war. Huh? So, you can judge my strength? Jin looked at him with interest. I don't remember that we've met before, my boy. He eagerly awaited Naruto's answer. Naruto shrugged. I can feel your aura and therefore I can roughly estimate how strong you are. You're definitely stronger than the demon I called last time. Naruto looked up at the sky and watched the clouds. So, the boy has the same ability as the 10 true gods. Jin looked into Naruto's eyes and could barely see any life inside. Only a small spark was visible, and he only saw that because he had met many people like Naruto in his life. Jin Tojo had already experienced a lot in his life. He had fought a long list of battles, and his opponents included demons of the highest class or gods themselves. He was always someone who stood out from the crowd. At 14 he was strong enough to join the Hero Clan's secret unit and was now feared as the strongest hero of all time. Jin looked ahead and calmly finished his cigarette, and when he put it out, he asked Naruto something else. So, you know about Chisato? Normally, no being could sense the powers of Chisato Hasegawa. Only the others from her clan could feel her powers. Naruto looked at Jin and raised an eyebrow. Didn't I just say that I can sense the auras of others? I knew about this woman from the start. I don't know what she is, but she's stronger than anyone in this town. Naruto shrugged and looked to the side where two police cars with flashing lights were just passing. It looked like something happened somewhere in town. You'd think police would be superfluous in a town like Kuoh. Most of the incidents were certainly triggered by supernatural beings. Then I'll tell you something, my boy. Jin put an arm over his shoulder and grinned. Don't tell anyone about this ability. You will be the only person who has this ability. Naruto sighed and just nodded. He had almost thought so. Were these all abilities to compensate for the loss of his chakra? He never wanted all these skulls, but he would use them. At the moment he didn't like how several people came into his life in such a short space of time. First there would be Issei, whom he rescued from the crow. After that there would be Yuki. He had fought her first in the hope of dying, and then he had to fight Zolgear with her because otherwise she would have died too. He would have liked to die, but Yuki wasn't allowed to die because of his ignorance, and that's why he made the deal with his sacred gear, and with his balance breaker he was able to defeat Zolgear. Since he hadn't used all his power, his entire life force wasn't used up and he was able to recover. After that, Takagawa came into his life. He had knocked him out of his mind a bit and made him accept the reality, even if he didn't like the reality. So, he had 3 people who would be around him more often from now on. If you count the people from the occult club, that would be a lot more than he would like. Now Chisato Hasegawa just didn't seem to give up. Again and again, she spoke to him and got him to do something with her. Now someone new had appeared, and this person also seemed to be interested in Naruto. He sighed again and looked up at the sky with his eyes closed. What's the matter with you, my boy? You seem so absent right now. Naruto opened his eyes. Let's just go inside. Ms. Hasegawa will surely be waiting. Jin nodded. That's a good idea. Eating is a great way to learn new sides of people. Naruto and Jin walked past the people, Jin taking his arm away from Naruto. When both were in the restaurant, all the tables were completely full. The new opening was an overall success for the restaurant's owners. Naruto and Jin walked past many tables and arrived at a table that seemed empty at first. A few men stood in front of it, but when they saw Jin, they left. Naruto could already guess why all the men were there. Naruto looked at the woman who had invited him. Chisato wore the same outfit she always wore to school. She just wasn't wearing her white coat, and that revealed her curves even more than they already were. Hello Uzumaki. I am glad you could come. Chisato looked at Naruto and Naruto bowed slightly. Thanks for the invitation. Naruto wanted to sit on the other side of the table, but Jin pushed Naruto over to Chisato's side and sat on the other side. There weren't chairs, there were benches. This meant that you could only sit on 2 sides and not like a table with chairs on all sides. Jin seated Naruto right next to Chisato with some force. Naruto frowned. Can you explain to me why you benched me right away? Jin looked at him innocently and smirked. Naruto's eye twitched slightly. This man was just like Kakashi in a way. First, he did something you didn't like, and then he grinned innocently at you. Do you have a problem sitting next to me, Uzumaki? Chisato looked at Naruto and Naruto looked at her. He shook his head. Of course not, Ms. Hasegawa. He looked back at Jin and raised his hand. He did something that has often been done in this world. He gave the middle finger to the man across from Naruto and Chisato. Jin didn't seem impressed, and when Naruto lowered his hand, a waiter came over.
Hello everyone. What it may be. Today the all-you-can-eat is reduced by 50%. Naruto knew immediately what would be ordered today. With such an offer, not to choose the all-you-can-eat would just be stupid. We take the all-you-can-eat. Jin ordered, and the waiter nodded as he wrote everything down. He moved away from the table because another table was calling him. Every once in a while, some people would walk down the aisles to go to the restroom or to go outside.
Smoking was not allowed in this restaurant. Although smoking was allowed in many restaurants, the owners made a conscious decision to do so because many potential customers were in favor of it in an online survey.
You had a son once, didn't you? Naruto seemed to have hit it straight in the black. Jin's otherwise carefree look turned serious. He seemed like a different person when Naruto addressed his son. Listen, Naruto. Jin's voice was serious, and you didn't want to argue with a voice like that. With Jin's power, that was another thing too. Many would not dare speak in such a voice. Naruto already knew that voice well enough. Every Hokage had a voice like that if they had to. He himself had to use such a voice more often during the war because he led some shinobi. We are here to eat barbecue. We should be talking about this subject. His brown eyes showed that he would not tolerate backtalk. Naruto nodded once. Closing his eyes, he lowered his head slightly to apologize. He opened his eyes and saw Jin's carefree face again. It was understandable that this strong man had many scars from all his struggles. On top of that, something seemed to have happened to his son. Yuki didn't want to talk about this topic either. Naruto had even noticed that Chisato was concerned about this issue. he couldn't imagine what happened to the son that not only his own father but even Chisato Hasegawa was so affected. Is she maybe Basara's mother? Although that would be somewhat illogical, if Chisato Hasegawa were the mother, she probably wouldn't be working at Kuoh Academy as a nurse. Why did you want to meet me, Jin? You're an interesting boy. He looked Naruto straight in the eyes. You have an interesting story. Naruto narrowed his eyes at that. Did these two know about his past? Normally this wouldn't be possible. Even if one could see through his memories with magic, it wouldn't be possible to know his entire history, and Naruto hadn't even realized Chisato was using magic on him. What do you mean? He didn't like that thought at all. He hoped his guess wasn't true. You're not the only one with special abilities, my boy. Jin smiled and looked at Chisato. She adjusted her glasses just once and looked at Naruto because he was looking at her too. Who or what are you, Ms. Hasegawa? Naruto asked straight out. Chisato would have known by now that Naruto knew about her. She touched his lips with her finger and immediately thereafter his eyes widened. He felt an immeasurable power for a brief moment, and right after that nobody moved in the restaurant except for Chisato and Naruto. Not everyone is allowed to hear this, so I changed our situation a bit. Chisato's green eyes were glowing with green energy. The power he felt from her so far wasn't even the full power of her. Only now did he really realize that she was much stronger than Jin, and he was as strong as that crow Naruto had sensed before. Why are you so interested in me, Ms. Hasegawa? A being like you shouldn't mess with a man like me. He couldn't understand it, and no matter how hard he tried his brain, he couldn't understand it. In the eyes of this woman, he must be a monster who took more than 1,000 lives in the war. If she really saw his past, anyway, then she should loathe him, and yet this woman didn't show the slightest bit of loathing for Naruto. Your soul is pure, Naruto Uzumaki. You had a very difficult life, never losing hope. No matter what others have done to you, you have always risked your life for others, willing to give your life for others if need be. Naruto closed his eyes and looked away. I had no choice, otherwise, I would never get everyone's approval. Someone like me had to act that way. You might say that now, Naruto Uzumaki, but throughout your life you have always pushed your limits and beyond for your joy. Your passing away in your old life was an unfortunate coincidence. Naruto snapped his eyes open. Wait. I died. I just fell through the portal and woke up in this world. He just didn't understand anything anymore. Did he really die?
You lost the power that every human being in your world was born with. She pointed at him. Your chakra left your body when you fell through the portal. Naruto was stunned. If he died, how did he wake up in this world, and why did he get sacred gear? Naruto just didn't understand anything anymore. Why am I still alive? He looked at her, waiting for an answer. Chisato stayed silent for 2 minutes. For Naruto those 2 minutes felt like an eternity. She just looked at him with her stoic face. She didn't move her face, although it was about such an important topic at the moment. Even Naruto was showing emotion momentarily, mostly being confusion and disbelief. His face showed clearly that he didn't believe that fact. I gave you a tiny part of my power, which gave you a new power. It was just so small that you stayed human. When I shared my power with you, your sacred gear also chose you as its bearer. Naruto just listened and couldn't believe what she was saying. He had received strength from this strong person, but only so little that he remained human. He was many things, but not completely stupid. He hadn't always been the fastest in his old life, and he often needed several explanations, but still he wasn't completely stupid.
I am not a normal person anymore after you gave me some of your power. Naruto was absolutely sure that he wasn't a real person anymore. If a being stronger than Jin or Zoldyr shared a small portion of their power with Naruto, then he would no longer be human. You're right to a certain extent. Chisato adjusted her glasses once. You are something else in a small way, but that part is overshadowed by your sacred gear, and that's why nobody feels that side of you. What am I? Naruto finally wanted to know the answer. You're a human-god hybrid right now. Naruto blinked a few times, just trying to process what he was hearing.
However, the part of the power I lent you is dwindling by the day. She could see it clearly. The portion she had given him back then was as good as used up. It would be a problem if Naruto lost all power from her. Am I part god? You want to bullshit me here, don't you? Naruto couldn't believe such a thing. After all, he was only human. How could he be a god? That sounded really absurd. I am not lying to you, Naruto Uzumaki. When I gave you my power, your body had changed. This power made you a human-god hybrid. However, you don't have much time left. She would have preferred to keep this information to herself a little longer, but she would have to tell him. He would have to make a decision soon. He's not going to like this message no matter how she twisted and turned it. Even with her strength, she couldn't grant him his wish to finally be reunited with his parents. I called you in today because I have something important to tell you. She didn't like it because he had suffered too long and too much. He had lost everything and just wanted to be redeemed. Be it in his old life or in this world, he had always lost everything and had to fight his way through because he had no other choice. That's what made Naruto Uzumaki so special. No matter how crappy the situation seemed or how much he wanted to do something, Naruto Uzumaki always kept his promises no matter what. He was always like this and would never change. That's why Chisato considered him worthy at the time. She could never ignore such a pure soul. He should have the chance to have a full life. Of course, he hadn't used this chance yet, but she was sure that he would be able to laugh in this world too. This power will diminish, and when it is depleted, you will die. Naruto raised both eyebrows and immediately saw an opportunity in that. He would just have to wait and then he would die. He wouldn't even let anyone near him or put anyone in danger using this method. It seemed like he still had a chance to be reunited with his parents early on. You'll have to make up your mind soon, Naruto Uzumaki. What do you mean, Ms. Hasegawa? He had already made up his mind. What you want to be. There was a problem with your appearance in this world. She didn't want to say those next sentences, but she had to tell him. He deserved the truth more than anyone. Naruto frowned. What do I want to become? What does she mean? If you should die, you will not be reunited with your parents. As Chisato said those words, Naruto's face went into shock. It was as if someone had turned off his brain for a brief moment. She really didn't want to say those words, but he needed to know. He needed to know the entire truth so that he could eventually make a decision. You have to decide if you want to move on, Naruto Uzumaki. If you have the will to go on living, then you have to make a different choice. Naruto just looked at her. He seemed completely hopeless at that moment. His only reason for being able to continue at all was the thought of being reunited with his parents one day. That hope was just shattered with a few words. He just looked at her and didn't move, didn't say anything and didn't breathe. His entire body stopped functioning for a moment. He breathed again after a few seconds, but still remained motionless. There is someone who could use your help, Naruto Uzumaki. Only you would be willing to help that person right now. She touched his forehead and his eyes widened. His body moved a little again when a minute later she lifted her finger from his forehead. He gasped heavily and then looked at her. Is that true? That was her life? He was still panting slightly, but he seemed to be able to talk normally again. 2 minutes ago, he couldn't even speak from the shock. Whatever Chisato showed him was enough to snap him out of his shock and clear his mind again. She just nodded and Naruto stayed silent. It was like that from the start. He couldn't ignore this person, even if he wanted to. He had promised someone that if he found out someone had been forced into a situation similar to that of himself as Jinchuriki, he would do whatever he could to help this person. You already know my answer if you've really seen my life. Chisato smiled slightly. Alright, Naruto Uzumaki, you just have to decide if you. 2 minutes later, everyone started moving again, and Jin stirred again too. So, what do you think? Naruto and Chisato looked at Jin. Both had stoic faces as before. I hope the meat is good. Naruto looked over to another table and could see some people eating meat. He was really hungry, especially with the smell in the restaurant. It will be. I know the owner personally and also his wife. He's on good terms with people who can get him the best meat. Jin looked away and smiled. He knew something had happened. Naruto looked a little different than before, although it wasn't directly visible. He still had his stoic face, but something was different in his eyes. A kind of flame flickered in his eyes, which could not be seen. Jin could only see the flame because he wasn't quite normal himself. He's no longer a normal person after he called the dragon and drank its blood. Naruto sighed slightly. He wouldn't have any free time from now on. After hearing the story from her, he couldn't stay away from her. If his assumption was correct, then tomorrow evening he would experience a lot. Naruto. Naruto was once again in the world he had visited twice before. Ryujin Jaka's voice was clearly heard. The inferno raged around Naruto, stronger than before. What's up? Is there something you want to tell me? He couldn't think of any other reason Naruto was here. After all, he hadn't spoken to Ryujin Jaka since his last visit. That woman wasn't entirely honest with you, Naruto. Naruto raised an eyebrow. He knew himself that Chisato hadn't told him the whole truth. This woman had ulterior motives of her own, so she told Naruto all this and helped him, even if she were a goddess and strong enough to handle everything herself. Should you die, you can be reunited with your parents in a roundabout way. It wouldn't be easy, but with the right tools, you could be reunited with your parents after your death. It will only be a long way to go. Would you be willing to take this long journey? A sacred gear always responded to the wearer's feelings, and Naruto's feelings were clear to Ryujin Jaka. Even if he had achieved everything and had nothing more to do in this world, He would still like to be reunited with his parents, even though he was first told by a goddess that he could never be reunited with his parents. Of course, I would be willing to go that route. If I have helped her, then I will do everything to get back to my parents. I could not see the paradox in the situation that was told to me there, but once I cleared my mind and thought things through, that's where I noticed it. It was pretty foolish to think that Naruto could never be reunited with his parents. In this world were demons, gods, dragons and other beings with indescribable powers, and that meant that there must be someone here too who could reunite him with his parents. Since I've been expecting something like this, I have another option for you, outside of the possibilities the goddess gave you. Naruto crossed his arms over his chest. He must soon decide what he wanted to become. He would soon die once all of Chisato's power was drained from him. He would need to become something else, if he really wanted to keep living. Deep in your subconscious, where even I don't lie, there is something hidden, an unknown power that I didn't notice until recently. I only noticed it because you used almost all of your life force on the balance breaker. It is possible that this hidden power could keep you from dying. Naruto narrowed his eyes and looked down at himself. So, he had an unknown power inside him? Did he browse something from his old world into this world, or was it something completely different? I could try to unleash that power, but it's not clear what could happen. You could die in the process. The procedure would be extremely painful. It would be worse than death itself. Naruto looked at the inferno. What are the chances that this power would be harmful? It has often happened that a power was not sealed in vain. It could well be that Naruto would no longer be himself when this unknown power was unleashed. It could all be good, of course, but there was always a risk. Very high. Ryujin Jaka's flames increased briefly and then calmed down a bit. It was as if he wanted to make his answer extra clear. This power was not pure. I couldn't feel much, but the power was dark and sinister. Whatever is sealed in your subconscious is dangerous. Naruto looked at his hands and then closed his eyes. He would probably be doing himself a favor if he said goodbye to this method. If he had no choice in the future, he could try to use this power. I'll turn down this offer for now. I'll think about what to do. As you wish, Naruto. That's all I wanted to tell you. Now go back to sleep and let your mind rest. You had to process a lot in the last 24 hours, and this has left you not only physically but mentally exhausted. In your current state, it would be easy to manipulate you with magic. Naruto nodded and then disappeared from the world. Whatever happens, Naruto, I will stay by your side. Naruto, you will not be alone no matter what you decide. The fire split briefly, and for a brief moment a person could be seen in this massive inferno. The inferno returned to normal, and the character disappeared into the eternal flames of Ryujin Jaka. The sky was dark, and many stars twinkled in the cloudless sky. The night seemed inconspicuous on Saturday, although many dark figures were up to mischief in the night. A man stood in a tree overlooking a park. He was dressed in a formal black suit with a white accent, a white dress shirt with a black bow tie and boots, to hide his face from others. He also was wearing a white mask with gold designs on it. Without the mask on, the man had slit eyes and elongated ears like most demons. He could clearly feel the target getting closer and closer. This night would decide what future the target would have. Would Naruto come and save her, or would the master of the demon get his hands on the target and thus have leverage? It was the only thing he could do for the target. Everything else now depended on Naruto and his determination to help that person. He held his cell phone in his hand and pressed the send button. He briefly closed his eyes behind his mask and then opened them again while his cell phone disappeared. He disappeared without a trace, and all that remained was a small gust of wind, which quickly faded, leaving nothing of his presence behind. The park was illuminated by the full moon, and that's why you could see everything well. Some people walked through the park because it was quite romantic for some couples or married couples. It had a beautiful atmosphere, and the moon gave everything a mysterious touch. Even some animals enjoyed the light, which was donated by the moon, and thus the animals could see everything. Especially owls or similar predators of the night enjoyed it. This made it easier for them to spot and catch their prey. The target also walked through the park and looked at the note that was in her locker yesterday. She was still wearing school clothes. The long red hair moved a bit as she got closer and closer to the destination. Here she was supposed to meet someone who could tell her everything about who murdered her parents back then. Why she had no choice and got sucked into this whole world of the supernatural. She had lost everything and luckily was able to find shelter here in Kuoh. But her pursuers would not stay away from her forever. Eventually they would attack here in Kuoh too, and she would have to be ready. She just had to find out who had murdered her parents back then. She had tried reaching out to Rias Gremory or Sona Citri, but they already had their hands full with fallen angels, so she was on her own. Mio Naruse stopped when she arrived at a well-known spot. A lot had started here for Issei, and a lot would also start here for Mio. She didn't know it yet, but this is where her fate would be decided, and everything depended on whether a certain person would show up. Mio closed eyes briefly and activated a spell. The landscape buckled briefly before returning to normal. Mio opened her pink eyes and looked around. All the people around her had disappeared and now she was alone. Around the area was a barrier that prevented normal people from entering this place. I am here. Mio shouted her message and looked around. I know you're here. Finally show yourself. A purple mist formed behind Mio and out there came the demon that was already on the tree. So, you appeared, Mio Naruse, a wise decision. Mio turned and narrowed her eyes. Who are you? She first wanted to know who had this information. It could well be that he would also be one of her pursuers, but she had to take that risk. She wouldn't find peace if she hadn't taken this chance. This might be the only way she had to find out. Even at the risk of meeting one of her pursuers, the knowledge she could gain was just too valuable. The demon bowed once. My name is Lars. He then straightened up again and looked directly at Mio. You would think that Lars couldn't see through his mask. Mio didn't see any holes to look through. Who murdered my parents? She wanted to get straight to the point because she had a bad feeling. Ever since Lars showed up, she had this bad feeling. She was just wondering if coming here alone was really the right idea. That's the big question, isn't it? Your real parents are still alive after all. Lars raised his hand and a purple magic circle appeared over his hand. A hologram representing two people appeared above the magic circle. I know that myself. I want to know who called my foster parents. Mio had to restrain herself from attacking Lars. She specialized in using magic and wasn't the strongest at hand-to-hand combat. If she ever got an ally, her ally should be good at melee combat. Lars remained quiet for a moment and lowered his hand again and the hologram in the magic circle disappeared. A demon named Zolgir. A magic circle appeared on the ground beside him, and a copy of Zolgir appeared directly above him in a puff of smoke. It was that demon. This is just a dummy. The real one was called by a human not too long ago. Lars raised his arm and pointed to the side. Mio couldn't believe it. The demon that had murdered her foster parents had already been called? You know the person Mio Naruse. Lars looked at her and a crystal ball appeared in his hand. This crystal ball served as a camera, allowing you to record things and play them back. He brought his arm out in front of him and held the crystal ball right in front of her eyes. Mio looked into the crystal ball and then appeared as if she was in a trance. Her entire attention was focused on the crystal ball. She didn't notice the purple portal that opened behind Mio Naruse and the woman walking out of it. In the crystal ball, Mio could watch the fight between Naruto, Yuki and Zolgir, although Yuki wasn't seen. Because only the part where Naruto activated his balance breaker was shown, she couldn't believe what she saw there. Naruto seemed like a demon in this video. All of his skin was engulfed in flames and his sword seemed to turn everything into ashes. Everything was engulfed in fire, even Zolgir. The video fast-forwarded a bit where all the flames were gone and Zolgir dodged a sword slash from Naruto and when he lightly touched the ground with his sword moments later, Naruto created a massive fissure that ran off into the distance. It looked like Naruto had carved a scar into the earth's crust. She didn't notice how a yellow magic circle appeared below her. The woman behind Mio casted a spell. Lars just kept holding the crystal ball in front of Mio and didn't move. He closed his eyes behind his mask. You don't have much time, Narukai. Hurry up. In another place, Akeno had just finished off a fallen angel with one of her lightning bolts. They were here to help Issei to free Asia Argento. A lot happened in the last 2 days. She actually wanted to go into the abandoned church with Rias and support the fight there, but she stopped when she felt a magic. There was a prohibition that the Gremory and their allies must never break. Before the evil peace system was introduced, it was still common to bind servants to a master with a special magic and thus guarantee his obedience. This system was banned because a servant would often die from the aftermath of disobeying his master. This forbidden magic should never be used. Every queen, regardless of peerage, had received special training to directly sense the activation of such magic over a wide area. She felt it very well. Somewhere in Kuoh, someone wanted to use this magic and make someone their servant with it. No one from Rias or Sona's peerage would do that, and that meant an unknown demon must be using that magic. Rias. Someone is using master-servant pact magic. Rias' eyes widened at the words. She looked straight at Akeno with red energy in her eyes. This magic went against everything the Gremory stands for. The Gremory treated servants not as slaves but as family members. The peerage was like a family of their own to the Gremory, and many alliances were forged through it. Where? She would like to help Issei, Yuto, and Kaneko, but she must fulfill her duties as the Gremory's daughter. This magic must definitely be stopped before it could be casted. In the direction of the park, we have to hurry, otherwise we'll be late. Both immediately spread their bat-like wings and flew off. Rias' body was surrounded by red energy, and she was pulsing. She always hated that magic. Back in the park, The yellow circle started to glow more and more. Lars looked sideways but didn't move. The woman behind Mio was surrounded by a light blue aura and in front of her hand was a blue magic circle. She was definitely doing something with Mio. Out of nowhere, someone appeared in front of Mio, wielding a katana to chase Lars and the woman away from Mio. The woman and Lars both jumped back and looked at the newcomer. He wrapped an arm around her waist and pointed his sword in Lars' direction. His eyes focused and his blonde spiky hair moved slightly from the rapid movement, as did his clothing. He wore black pants, an orange t-shirt and a black leather jacket over it. Around his neck, Lars could see a chain with a pendant that was a green crystal. Mio was startled when she was snapped out of her trance by Naruto's appearance. Huh. She looked perplexed at the man who just had an arm around her waist. She saw Naruto. So, you came Naruto Uzumaki. Lars spoke and interrupted Mio. She wanted to push Naruto away, but Lars' voice stopped her. She looked at Lars and could now see the woman who just appeared behind her. What does that mean, Takagawa? Naruto's voice echoed through the silent park. He looked menacing and his blue eyes weren't the same anymore. They were eyes of a caller. Those eyes had seen more than many would ever see. I am sorry Narukai, but unfortunately I can't explain anything to you. You should worry more about yourself and Naruse right now. He pointed to the ground and Naruto and Mio looked at the yellow magic circle below them. Naruto wanted to move but he couldn't move anymore. His eyes widened slightly. Mio couldn't move either. Her gaze was currently on Naruto's face and because of that she had nowhere else to look. Takagawa. What did you do? Naruto should have known it. He should never trust Takagawa, even though he had a hunch. Lars. Did you arrange this? The woman next to Lars looked at him. Lars looked at the woman. What am I supposed to have arranged? I was surprised myself by the human. He pointed to his suit where there was a cut. Naruto had just hit Lars and placed a cut on his suit. If I hadn't reacted, I could have died. Uzumaki. What are you doing here? Mio couldn't move, but she just had to ask the question. Naruto's gaze was directed at Lars and that's why he could only look at her out of the corner of his eye. I am here to help you. We both have a lot in common and I've decided to protect you from now on. Mio's eyes widened a bit. I'll explain later. Naruse, can you somehow break this spell? There's nothing I can do. But he paused as the magic circle grew brighter and they both felt something happen to them. A weird badge appeared around Mio's neck with a heart on the front part and right after that it disappeared again. A strange symbol with a heart in the center appeared on Naruto's right hand and a red aura appeared around Mio. Come on Maria. Lars looked at Maria and pointed in the direction where the two demons came from. Rias Gremory and Akeno Himejima will be here soon. The Gremory should find out anything about what we did. Lars looked at Naruto and Mio once. The yellow magic circle under the two had disappeared and immediately afterwards both became unconscious. Sorry Narukai, you had to become the master of Mio. Anyone else would keep her a slave. You will treat her well. I am curious how you will address me on Monday. Lord Zolgir will not like this, Lars. Maria turned and created a portal. She went through the portal and just disappeared. Lars remained silent for a moment and looked again at Naruto, who woke up again. He looked at Lars with one open eye. Sorry Narukai. This had to be in order for Naruse to be safe. You are the only one who can protect her. This was the only way I could prevent my master from getting her. After that, he simply disappeared without a trace. Damn Takagawa. What have you done? Naruto passed out afterwards and didn't notice a green magic circle appearing beneath him. Naruto and Mio just sank into the magic circle and disappeared. When Rias and Akeno arrived at the park, the barrier was already gone, and they couldn't see anyone. The two tried to find any clues as to who was here, but they couldn't find anything. Not even a trace of the magic remained, meaning it was successful. If such a spell had broken off, one would still have been able to see traces. Rias, we need to contact Sirzek-sama. Rias didn't want to ask her big brother for help so easily, but she had no other choice. She nodded and turned around. Let's go back to school. I need to speak to my brother in person. She desperately needed to find out more and tell her brother about everything. Of course, Rias, Akeno and Rias used teleportation to make their way to the club room. The issue of Issei, Asia, Yuto, and Kaneko was secondary. No master-servant pact had ever been successfully concluded in the human world. Nobody knew what could happen as a result and what effects this could have. When Naruto woke up, he felt a shock go through his entire body. He looked around and could see that he was in his room. He straightened into a sitting position and put a hand to his head. Damn it. What happened? His memories were a bit hazy. All he could remember was turning up at the park and after that everything was blurry. He stood up noticing something odd on his hand. On his hand was a glowing symbol and he could clearly feel the aura of a certain person. Why can I feel the aura of Naruse so clearly? The symbol had a heart in the middle and 4 spikes around it. The symbol disappeared again, and after that the aura was not felt as strongly as before. Naruto frowned. Something had happened in the park yesterday and that seemed to be the effect. He wanted to sit on the floor, but his cell phone rang. He bent down and picked up his cell phone from the floor. It was a message from Chisato. He opened it and read the contents of the message. As he read the message, his eyes kept widening. Yesterday in the park you were bound to Mio Naruse with a special magic. I couldn't dissolve the magic. This magic binds you to Mio Naruse on a level where even I cannot intervene. Come to me today so that I can explain everything to you in peace. My address is. Naruto was still in yesterday's clothes, so he was able to head straight for the road. He wanted to help Mio, but he didn't want to be bound to her by magic. Who knew what side effects this would have? A few minutes later, Naruto appeared in front of Chisato's apartment door. He wasted no time and traveled all the way with the flash step. His hair and clothing moved slightly from the rapid movement. When he appeared, Chisato's door opened at the same time, wearing the same as usual. She made room for him to go into the apartment. Come in, we have a lot to talk about. Naruto nodded and walked into the apartment. Chisato closed the door behind him and followed him into her large living room. It was elegantly decorated, and the furniture wasn't cheap. That was clear from the start. So, what happened yesterday, Ms. Hasegawa? Naruto looked at Chisato. He was still standing and had no thoughts of sitting down at the moment. He just wanted to know what had happened. Let's sit on the couch and then I'll tell you everything. Chisato walked past Naruto and sat on the couch. Naruto just followed her and sat down as well. This magic was created a long time ago. It is a magic that connects two souls. One soul is the master, and the other soul is the servant. Chisato adjusted her glasses once and continued. This magic is no longer used by many demons, as this magic harbors a high risk for the servant. This magic is to ensure that the servant does not betray the master. If the servant refuses to do something for his master, or if the servant has cunning thoughts about its master, a curse is activated. What curse? Naruto didn't like that explanation at all. There are many different variants. It all depends on the magic used to seal the pact. Since I could feel the magic of a succubus on Naruse, the curse will put her in an aroused state. Naruto blinked a few times and gave Chisato a sideways look. Aroused state? What kind of curse is that supposed to be? People are often aroused. If this curse only triggers something that every human being has on a daily basis, then it wouldn't be as bad as he first thought. The servant gets so aroused she couldn't control herself. Only the master could satisfy the UAL desire of the servant again. If someone else did this, the servant would die. The person would also die if no one satisfied that craving. Naruto didn't know what to say to that. Whoever the servant was had the ass card. Is there a way to break this bond again or remove the curse? There had to be a way, otherwise Naruto wouldn't know what to do. He already had another person come into his life. Officially, he no longer had any freedom. He had of course decided to help Mio, but still the way so far had been very different than planned. He wanted to approach her at school and slowly develop a friendship there. Now either he or she was the other servant. This wasn't planned and Naruto would do anything to break the magic. Personally, I can't solve this magic. You have to wait until the next full moon and then the person who cast the magic could also undo it, but you have to get through this month somehow. Naruto leaned back and looked at the ceiling. He just couldn't believe it. He had to watch what he thought about Naruse for a month, or he would be plagued with a bad desire for, and if Mio didn't satisfy his desire he would die. I was only able to do one small thing, unfortunately. Naruto looked at Chisato. I was able to soften the curse and suppress it for now, but you and Naruse have to be careful. My measure only works as long as you pay attention to what you think about the other person. Naruto remembered something. How do you actually tell who the master is and who is the servant? The master has the symbol on his hand and the servant around his neck. Naruto's eyes widened. Was he the master? That's just great. He just didn't hope that Naruse would have funny thoughts. You also have to slowly decide what you want to become. You hardly have any strength left of me. She could see just a little light of her strength remaining in Naruto. Naruto frowned. Great. As if I didn't already have enough shit for today. Naruto had actually made up his mind beforehand, but he figured he could just stay human for a little longer. Although he was never really a normal person, he's not from this world, after all. With a normal body, Naruto would never have been able to directly awaken his sacred gear or use his normal abilities without issue. I want to stay part human, so I'll accept your power, Ms. Hasegawa. Naruto stood up and looked at her. I want to be a hero. Heroes were humans chosen by a special group of gods to gain power. Chisato was a member of this group of special gods. A god decided to create his own race, and that's how the angels were created, and later the fallen angels evolved from it. Just like the first heroes, Naruto would get power from a god and through that he would become a hero. Naruto just noticed something. He wasn't a human-god hybrid the whole time, he was just part hero. A human couldn't easily become a god. Even if the power came from a god, that would not directly make a human a god, especially not with the group of gods who passed on their power to the humans and thus the heroes were created. Naruto now only became a real hero and not a pseudo-hero like he used to be. So, you noticed. Then get ready. The ceremony will take a long time and it will be difficult for you. She got up and walked past Naruto. It would take more than one day, but Naruto would be a full-fledged hero after completing the ceremony. Naruto followed her. How exactly will the ceremony be held? Naruto and Chisato stopped in front of a door. She turned and looked at him. You want need to know that Uzumaki, you want remember the ceremony. Naruto's eyes widened when Chisato put a finger on his forehead and then everything went black. Naruto woke up in his apartment and looked around. He couldn't see or sense anyone in his apartment. He briefly held his head with one hand as he remembered something from last night. His eyes widened as he looked at his palm. The mark on his hand appeared and right after that he could feel Mio Naruse. He frowned and tried to deactivate that power again. Chisato had warned him that Mio would always feel the activation of this power and unintentionally strengthen the bond with Naruto. It's all because she became the servant. The more Naruto used this power, the stronger the bond would become. Naruto wanted to strengthen the bond, but not in this way. Luckily the marking disappeared again after 10 seconds. Naruto sighed and stood up. He went into the bathroom and looked at his torso in the mirror. The tiles in his bathroom were old and outdated. Everything in his apartment, apart from his new mattress, was outdated. He didn't care. He wondered why he was only wearing his orange boxers and the necklace and where his other clothes had gone. They weren't in his room. He narrowed his eyes as he felt an unfamiliar aura outside his apartment. It was the aura of a demon and a strong one at that. He's not as strong as this Zolgir, but he was stronger than most of the demons in Kuoh. The demons from his school wouldn't probably stand a chance against this demon outside his apartment. Naruto waited and looked at the wall. It was as if he could see through the walls of his apartment. He just looked exactly at the place where the aura was. After 5 minutes, the aura ran out of the building and departed at high speed. He went to a window and looked in the direction where the aura disappeared. He saw that the sun was already setting. He seemed to have slept longer than he first thought. He went back into the bathroom and stood under the shower. He felt the warm water running over his tense body. His body was tense the whole time, as if he still had to get used to something. Naruto could only think that it was because of his change. After all, he should be a hero now. He raised an arm and somehow tried to activate the green aura of the heroes, which he had seen on Yuki several times. While this aura always surrounded her, all attributes had increased, be it their strength, speed or other physical attributes. Oddly enough, he didn't feel anything. He dropped his arm back to his side and enjoyed the warm water running down his tense body. He closed his eyes and leaned back a little, so the water ran over his face. It was very pleasant. He remembered the training journey he had done with Jiraiya through this feeling. This trip was shortly after the fight with Kakuzu, where he still had his arm in a cast. He was with Jiraiya in the Hot Springs village and there he developed a combination jutsu with Gamatotsu. He had combined his wind chakra with a water jutsu from Gamatotsu, and by doing so, the two together unleashed an extremely powerful attack that could even destroy Guren's crystal prison. He smiled and remembered the moment he was training with Jiraiya. After 20 minutes he got out of the shower and dried himself. He tied the towel around his waist and stood in front of the mirror. His body was still tense. Although it wasn't as strong as before, the warm water helped his body relax a bit, although it would take a few more hours for him to fully recover. He didn't know what day of the week it was. All he knew was that it was Sunday when he showed up at Chisato's apartment and ended up losing consciousness. He closed his eyes and tried to find a new power inside himself that he hadn't felt before. He could feel his sacred gear clearly and distinctly, but other than that, he didn't feel any renewed strength within himself. He thought that a hero's energy was something like chakra in feeling, but as it turned out, that wasn't the case. He also wondered if he had become a hero at all. So far, he hadn't seen any signs of it. He hadn't yet been able to generate the hero's green aura or otherwise detect anything that confirmed his transformation into a hero. All he could say was that he had more power than before. He felt that, but otherwise nothing was different. He shook his head and walked out of the bathroom and then into his bedroom. He opened his closet and took out a pair of black pants. He put them on and put the necklace back around his neck, which he had taken off before showering. This necklace wasn't the original necklace that Tsunade had given him back then. He had bought this necklace in this world because it looked exactly like Tsunade's necklace. She exuded no aura or power. She just reminded Naruto of all his friends and family in the elemental nations. This necklace was his most prized possession, even though it only costed $5. Naruto put on an orange t-shirt and a black leather jacket over it. He walked into the hallway and put on his black shoes. He took his cell phone, keys and wallet and left his apartment. He wanted to take a walk so he could think about everything. He locked the door behind him and started walking. The whole city was bathed in a red-orange light in the setting sun. It was a beautiful sight that made Naruto smile slightly. Konoha was bathed in such a light at every sunset. He could always see it perfectly from his father's head. In hindsight, it was clear why he was always attracted to the fourth Hokage and why he thought he was the coolest of all the Hokage back then. A son admired his father, especially one as incredible as Minato Namikaze. Naruto's body moved on its own as he walked through Kuoh. He looked up at the sky and saw something weird. He stopped and narrowed his eyes. He was too deep in thought, and that's why he didn't feel the strong aura in Kuoh's sky at first. He could see the man clearly, a man with 12 raven black wings behind his back. This was the person he felt on the Friday before visiting the restaurant. This person was stronger than Zolgyr and about as strong as Jin. The person appeared to be looking straight at Naruto and smirked as he did so. The person was wearing a gray kimono and normal sandals. Naruto saw the person disappear. At first, he just hovered there in the air, and the next moment he disappeared from the scene. I could only briefly see in which direction this man disappeared. I really must train again. Otherwise I won't have a chance against such strong opponents in the future. Too many people are back in my life now. I need to get stronger. Naruto turned and moved to the outer part of Kuoh. He wanted to do some training today. He needed to start training again, and maybe he could use his powers as a hero. Since he didn't see anyone, he just disappeared and reappeared a few meters before disappearing again. He was currently using the flash step to move around town at high speed. That special ability was the most useful thing he could have gotten. If his sacred gear only gave him control of fire, he would have lost to an opponent long ago. He had only ever won with the flash step. He was now thankful that he had this ability. He cursed that ability before, but now he was glad of it. Without this technique he would have lost to Zolgyr, and Yuki might be dead now. Naruto appeared outside of Kuoh a few minutes later and looked around. He couldn't sense an aura around him, so he jumped in the air and landed on both hands. He was currently in a handstand, so he stayed for now. He needs to know how much his hero transformation had brought. Of course, as a human in this world, his stamina was not nearly as high as his stamina as a shinobi in the elemental nations. He could stay in this position for hours in the elemental nations, but as a human he only lasted a few minutes. He's still technically human. Although he was a hero now, at least he should be. He closed his eyes and just concentrated on keeping his composure and staying in his position. He started to go into a kind of trance when suddenly a beautiful melody could be heard everywhere. Naruto didn't move even though someone appeared right in front of him. The melody didn't stop as the woman in front of him raised her arm. Naruto's eyes snapped open, surprising the woman. He pushed away from the woman and landed safely on both feet. He narrowed his eyes as he looked at the woman across from him. This woman was a demon. There was no doubt about that, although her aura felt odd. Who are you? Naruto's body was tense and ready in case the woman became aggressive. He hadn't yet summoned his sacred gear. I've been looking for you for a while. The person knelt down and Naruto gave her a sideways look. The demon or woman, whatever, knelt before him on one knee, bowing her head in the process. It was that classic kneeling before a king or master that Naruto had seen in some of the images from books before. What's that supposed to be? Naruto remained cautious, but he wanted to know what was going on here. The demon lifted her head and opened her eyes. You set me free, Naruto-sama. Wow. Always slow. Explain yourself and don't call me that. He didn't call anyone that, and he wasn't going to start now. He even called the former Kage by a nickname. He even called Jiraiya Pervy Sage, although he was his master and deserved more respect. That's just how Naruto was, and in this world, he always used people's last names, adding Chisato's M's to the front, which was why he always said Ms. Hasagawa. You called my creator and former master, Naruto-sama. Naruto's eyebrows twitched at hearing her call him Naruto-sama again. He really couldn't stand that way of being addressed. Once again, just call me Naruto or we'll have a problem. Naruto's eyes changed slightly. He was letting some of his murderous thirst out and it seemed to be having a small effect. The demon bowed again. As you wish, Naruto. My name is Zest. I am an artificially created demon and my previous master was Zolgyr. Naruto narrowed his eyes and Ryujin Jaka appeared in his hand. He held the katana in her direction. What does a servant want from the man I called here? Are you here to take revenge? Zest was a tall, tanned-skinned white-haired young woman with a slim yet shapely figure and gold-green eyes. She had a rabbit tail and rabbit ear-shaped horns. Neither appear in her human form. Zolgyr had created her from all of his tastes of women, such as having a well-shaped and sturdy figure. No. Naruto was still pointing his katana at her. Why should I trust you? You are a creation of a powerful demon that I called. It would only be normal for you to want to avenge your late master. Zest closed her eyes and shook her head. She wanted to say something but was interrupted. A massive fireball appeared out of nowhere and raced straight for Zest. She pounded the ground with both fists and a black magic circle appeared under Zest. A massive wall of earth rose in front of Naruto and Zest. Catching the fireball, there was a small explosion, destroying the outer parts of the earth wall. Naruto covered his face with one arm to keep dirt from flying into his eyes. His katana was still at his side. He lowered his arm and felt the aura of another demon. The earth wall lowered back into the ground and after that a demon appeared in front of Naruto and Zest. Naruto narrowed his eyes. This demon was stronger than Zest, that much is clear. Here you are, Zest. We've been wondering what became of you. I had a hunch you would lead me straight to the person who called Zolgyr. The demon had a menacing aura about it. Halbor-sama. Zest hadn't expected Halbor to show up here. She looked at Naruto and then back at one of Zolgyr's comrades. She, of course, knew the organization Zolgyr had joined to gain more power. After all, she was Zolgyr's direct servant and therefore knew almost everything. Zolgyr hadn't planned to die against a human. She would have served under Zolgyr for eternity if Naruto hadn't accidentally called her former master. She could do nothing and not allow herself bad thoughts. She was under the master-servant pact and wasn't using the magic of a succubus, which would only trigger her UAL desire. Death's magic was used, and a single bad thought would have called Zest instantly. That was one of the reasons why this magic was now forbidden. If only succubus magic were used or similar magics where the servant wouldn't die directly, then master-servant pact magic might even be allowed. Halbor had short black hair and two horns sticking out through his hair. He had red eyes with black slits that looked like Kurama's eyes. In addition, Halbor wore a black robe that covered most of his body except for his brown boots. I am really amazed. Halbor snapped his fingers once, and the landscape buckled briefly before returning to normal. Zest and Naruto knew full well that Halbor created a barrier around the three. The two wouldn't get out of here until they defeated Halbor. I am starting to feel like I am in a bad theater. How many more beings or people want to come into my life? Naruto frowned in annoyance. This Zest really didn't seem to be after him. She had even created the earth wall and thus protected Naruto as well. She seemed gifted at earth magic. Naruto tried to awaken the hero's power within himself, but like before, he couldn't feel any of the hero's power. When he's done with this guy, he'll have to talk to Chisato or Ryujin Jaka. You are only human and yet you were able to take down Zolgyr. From the looks of it, your sacred gear seems very special there. In a black light, a white katana appeared in Halbor's hands. He held it up. I am curious if you were really that strong or if someone else took down Zolgyr. The temperature seemed to drop as Halbor summoned this katana. Zolgyr attacked me. I was just defending myself. Naruto took the starting position and narrowed his eyes. Zest also appeared to be getting ready to fight. Are you here to take revenge? Partly. Halbor took a step forward, and as he did so, a black aura appeared around him. I should find out what happened to Zolgyr. I could find out quickly that he had taken an interest in Rias Gremory and Mio Naruse. He always had a soft spot for girls with special powers. After that I found out that Zest was nowhere to be found, and when I found her, I knew right away that she would betray us. Since she wasn't longer tied to Zolgyr, she no longer had a reason to be on our side. Zest gritted her teeth as she realized she was found so quickly. She knew, of course, that the organization would get wind of her betrayal directly, but she didn't think that someone would find her directly. When I've finished with you and Zest, then it'll be gone again. Halbor disappeared and appeared right in front of Zest. She just reacted and jumped back to avoid the slash of Halbor's katana. Naruto disappeared and appeared right behind Halbor. Halbor simply turned and raised his katana. A white mist appeared around the katana as Naruto's blade met his blade. The air around Naruto's katana shimmered with the heat exuding from Ryujin Jaka. Both blades rubbed together, producing yellow sparks. Naruto's blue eyes met Halbor's eyes, which were so similar to Kurama's eyes. Your sacred gear seems to generate some kind of heat. Halbor and Naruto moved away from each other and immediately afterwards, Halbor had to jump into the air because a large spike of rock shot out of the earth and nearly pierced him. Zest had created a spike of earth with her magic and wanted to pierce Halbor with it. However, this wasn't so easy to do. Halbor may not be the leader of the organization, but he was one of its best fighters. Naruto appeared right behind Halbor, swinging his katana. His blade ignited and immediately after that it crashed into the blade of Halbor. So, you can create fire with your katana. Halbor pushed Naruto away and thrust his katana forward. An ice-cold blast of air came out of his katana, which froze everything in its path. In addition, a black magic circle appeared over Naruto, where dark magic collected and shortly afterwards discharged in a concentrated beam. Naruto frowned and disappeared before either attack could hit him. Naruto's eyes widened as Halbor appeared behind him while Naruto used the flash step. "You're fast." Naruto looked over his shoulder and saw Halbor raise his sword, "but you're not fast enough." Naruto was able to turn around and block the sword slash with his left arm. Zest didn't see this interaction because she wasn't specialized for such speeds, she was more specialized in magic, defense and power. When Naruto and Halbor reappeared, Naruto was holding his left arm with which he had taken the blow. He had a cut on his upper arm and a lot of blood oozed out from there. "Naruto." Zest held up her arms, and as she did so, 2 black magic circles appeared in front of her. She wouldn't let Naruto die here. She was here, after all, to pledge her life to her savior. Halbor had to jump in the air because a black wall of dark magic rose in front of Naruto and behind Halbor as well. The 2 walls of dark magic raced toward each other, intent on crushing Halbor. Naruto looked at his arm and gritted his teeth. This Halbor is faster than Zolgear. He looked at Halbor, ignoring the pain. He had endured much worse pain before, and this was nothing. He just couldn't use his left arm in this fight. That means Naruto was at a disadvantage. "When are you going to release me?" The whole area around Naruto went gray when he heard that deep voice. His eyes widened as his whole body started shaking a little. He could hardly move. He had already experienced a lot and he had already felt a lot, but he had never experienced such a bottomless power and fear before. It was just like when he first met Kurama. "Who are you?" It wasn't Ryujin Jaka who was talking to him now. The voice was very different, and if Ryujin Jaka spoke to him, Naruto would find himself inside of him. "I've been waiting for you to show up for years. When are you going to release me?" Naruto's eyes narrowed as he slowly got used to the feeling. He really didn't know what was going on here or who was talking to him. "I won't release you until you tell me who you are." Naruto shouted those words out into the gray world he's in right now. Everything around him was gray and time seemed to have stood still. "One day you will need me and then you will wake me. Consider my words, Naruto Uzumaki. The gods only help people out of selfishness. Even your sword is only in your possession because a god wants something from you. You'll come to me soon if you need me." That deep and dark voice reverberated through the landscape and faded like an echo before everything returned to normal. Naruto looked to the side and saw Halbor launching a massive fireball from a red magic circle. Naruto raised his sword, and it caught fire. Just before the fireball hit him, Naruto made a downward slash and split the fireball in half with his katana. There was an explosion behind Naruto as the fireball hit the ground. Naruto charged and attacked Halbor. He had to dodge some ice pillars that came out of the ground. Halbor seemed to be able to control ice with his katana. Zest hit the ground with both hands and immediately afterwards the ground in front of her tore open. Spikes of earth rose in a straight line from the earth. Halbor deflected Naruto's attack, stomping once on the ground. A black magic circle appeared under his feet and immediately after that, magic exploded out of his body, destroying everything around him. Naruto was able to disappear in time and appear outside of Halbor's attack. The earth spikes that Zest created were all destroyed by Halbor's attack. Zest spread her bat-like wings and flew into the air as Halbor launched a massive fireball at her. The fireball missed its target and hit some trees, which were immediately reduced to ashes. Naruto held his katana over his head, and it caught fire. The fire around his katana grew ever larger, and when Naruto made a downward slash, he unleashed a massive wave of fire that reduced everything to ash. Halbor just raised his arm and created a magical barrier in front of him. The massive wave of fire slammed into the barrier, spreading fire in all directions. Halbor paid close attention to his barrier, and as he did so, the white mist reappeared around his katana. He thrusted it into the ground, and when Naruto's wave of fire stopped, he pushed his sword a little deeper into the ground. Large ice crystals formed in a straight line. Naruto an arc of red fire with his katana, and with that he just wanted to melt or break the ice, but he was allowed to see how his fire didn't work. It destroyed a few ice crystals, but new ones were formed immediately, and they came closer and closer to Naruto. He disappeared with his flash step and appeared in the air. Halbor appeared in front of Naruto and swung his katana. Naruto blocked a slash from Halbor and had to stop him from hitting him. With only one arm he didn't have as much strength as with both, and currently Halbor was pressing his katana against Naruto's katana. Naruto's arm was shaking from the immense force that was being exerted on him now. He changed the position of his blade and was able to deduce the power. Halbor's katana slid past Naruto, causing Halbor's body to fall slightly forward. Naruto disappeared and appeared behind Halbor. He wanted to kick him, but Halbor just disappeared as Naruto's foot was about to dig into his back. Naruto felt a sharp pain in his back the next moment, and then he sped towards the ground. Halbor had appeared behind Naruto and kicked him towards the ground. Naruto gritted his teeth as he hit the ground, sinking slightly into the ground from the force of the impact. A cloud of dust rose around him, obscuring Naruto. Zest wanted to go to Naruto, but Halbor appeared in front of her and blocked her way. "Where are you going, Zest?" His red eyes glowed a little, and right after that he swung his katana. Zest created a barrier in front of her, blocking the katana. She wouldn't stand a chance alone against Halbor. She flew into the air, unleashing a beam of white magic from her right hand. Halbor just raised his hand and created a barrier in front of him. The magic ray hit his barrier and was successfully negated. Halbor just disappeared and appeared right in front of Zest. Zest was just able to dodge to the side to avoid Halbor's katana. Both continued to fight in the air while the ground slowly began to tremble. A large pillar of fire rose from the spot where Naruto crashed into the ground. In the pillar of fire, Halbor and Zest could see the shadow of Naruto's body. Naruto stood up and opened his eyes. His blue eyes glowed red in the pillar of fire. Naruto stormed out of the pillar of fire, igniting his katana. He appeared right behind Halbor, swinging his katana. Halbor blocked Naruto's attack and pushed him away. Naruto immediately swung his katana again, creating an arc of red fire that hit Halbor this time. Naruto then landed on the ground and gasped a bit. His left arm was still bleeding. He wouldn't be able to win against Halbor like this. He may not have as high magical power as Zolgyr, but he was much faster and has more physical power. Damned. I am not fast enough to hurt him. His barrier can even stop Ryujin Jaka's flames. This isn't good. Naruto had to dodge to the side because a beam of black magic was flying towards him. The earth was ripped open a bit, and right after that there was an explosion. Naruto could see that Halbor was completely unharmed even though he had just hit him with his fire. He frowned and looked at Halbor. Zest landed on the ground next to Naruto and Halbor stood a few feet away from them both. "Is that all?" Halbor looked at the two disappointed. "I really expected more. I really don't know how you defeated Zolgyr with your skulls." He took a step forward and the white mist around his katana appeared. "I am going to end this now." Zest created a large yellow magic circle in front of her and Naruto, and out of it shot a lightning dragon in the shape of an Asiatic dragon. Halbor simply swung his katana, unleashing a strong gust of freezing air. The lightning dragon was negated and destroyed by Halbor's attack. Zest gritted his teeth. Why did they have to send Halbor? It was frustrating. She had just barely thought about what it would be like to have another master so many times. She must never think about something like that for too long. Otherwise she would have died directly. All the experiments Zolgyr did with young women were terrible. He used a special form of succubus magic to turn the women into mindless slaves. He had kidnapped countless young female demons and then made them his slaves. He had always tried something new, and he never cared about his victims. He only used them as his toys and nothing else mattered to him. If he got new insights, the victims on his way didn't matter at all. Too often had Zest to dispose women's bodies because their will was completely broken, and they were nothing more than a body without a soul. Unfortunately, she couldn't help any of Zolgyr's victims, but she would have liked to. Now she would finally have the chance to have a new master, and now he was being taken away from her because Halbor wanted to call him. She wanted to do something about it, but she wasn't strong enough to do it. She was tied to Zolgyr for too long, where she wasn't allowed to do any training. Naruto looked at his katana and then back at Halbor. If Naruto hadn't been strengthened by Chisato, he would already be dead. He's faster and stronger than in the fight against Zolgyr, and he had more stamina.
Halbor was just a shovel stronger than Zolgyr, and that's why Naruto couldn't even hurt him so far. The strength of Ryujin Jaka's flames also depended on Naruto's strength. The stronger Naruto gets, the hotter Ryujin Jaka's flames get. Right now, they aren't hot enough to hurt Halbor, at least not in the current state of his sacred gear. He would have no choice but to use his balance break, but for that, Zest would have to get out of the barrier.
He remembered something from last night. He couldn't remember anything Chisato did to him. He apparently had a conversation with Ryujin Jaka that night, and that's where he found out all about the true power of his balance breaker. He should only use this power when no one was around, otherwise, these people would also die. Naruto looked at Zest and thought for a moment, should he really spare her? It could all be a trick too. So far, she really seemed to be on his side, but this whole scenario could also be a trap, and if Zest had his trust, then she could betray him. Unfortunately, he didn't have much time and decided to listen to his instincts. Zest, try to get out of that barrier somehow. Zest looked at Naruto a bit shocked. What? Never. I won't leave you, Naruto-sama. She couldn't believe what she heard there. She wouldn't leave Naruto alone against this strong opponent. I'll use my balance breaker, but you'll have to get out of the barrier to do that, otherwise, you will die. Red flames rose around the two and Zest could feel the extreme heat directly. Go away if you're not want to die. I've decided to believe you for now, Zest. But if you die now, that's your business. He turned away and walked towards Halbor. Zest's eyes widened and she looked after Naruto for a moment. The fire around his katana changed slightly. The flame seemed wilder, and the flames changed a bit. The otherwise so orange-yellow-red flame became almost mainly red. Zest swallowed as she suddenly felt a deep fear. Her whole body started shaking. She did the only right thing at that moment and turned to the barrier and stormed off. She concentrated a high amount of magic into her right fist, and in doing so, her right fist became encased in purple magic. She cried out once and hit the barrier with all her strength. There was a small shockwave, and it cracked the barrier before creating a small hole where Zest just barely fit through. She slipped out of the barrier and turned around. She could see everything inside the barrier, although the barrier closed again and someone outside the barrier couldn't see anything inside the barrier. Even with such barriers, only demons or other beings who have attained a certain level of strength could see everything that goes on inside the barrier. Halbor stopped and suddenly felt the heat on his skin. Even with the cold air his katana was producing, he felt the heat all over his body. He narrowed his eyes when Naruto looked completely different. What is that power? Until now, I didn't feel any of the flames or the heat. Now I can feel them all over my body. What is this sacred gear? He knew a lot of sacred gears, especially any sacred gears that were powerful enough to call a god or just slightly weaker. Halbor had burned every strong sacred gear into his brain so he would always be prepared for anything. But this sacred gear meant nothing to him. This sacred gear was at too high a level to be a weak one. Had really liked to know what that sacred gear was. Naruto stopped and raised his katana in the air, holding it diagonally in front of him. The flames around him raged very hard for a moment. Balance break. Zanka no Tachi, Longsword of the Remnant Flame. All flames disappeared at once and the blade changed in the process. The blade took the form of an ancient and worn-out katana, severely scorched by fire. The blade also produced smoke from several parts. The white fog around Halbor's katana disappeared and he had to swallow once. The whole air shimmered a bit and he felt directly how dry his throat was. He couldn't believe it. He saw no fire but felt extreme heat on every fiber of his body. It felt like he was going to burn. He created a barrier right around himself, but still it felt like being burned alive. It was just unbelievable how powerful this sacred gear was. He also saw that the clouds inside the barrier had completely disappeared. It was as if every kind of liquid in the air had been vaporized by extreme heat. Halbor's eyes widened as Naruto suddenly disappeared, leaving only flames at his last location. He could only just dodge to the side. He tried to catch Naruto with his katana, but just as his katana hit him, Halbor looked at him in confusion. Naruto just looked over his shoulder, completely unscathed. Halbor noticed something unusual. More than half of his katana was missing. He looked at his katana in disbelief, which he had been given by his boss. This katana could control ice and snow. It wasn't a sacred gear like Naruto's katana. It was just a magic weapon forged with magic. It didn't have the strength of certain sacred gears, of course, but his katana was anything but weak. He had already defeated many opponents with it. Naruto turned around and swung his katana again. Halbor was standing directly in front of a large rock. He was just able to duck, and when Naruto's katana only lightly touched the rock, there was a brief moment before the whole rock was simply pulverized. It was as if someone cut it off with a blade and then just turned it to dust. Halbor's eyes widened as he saw the effect of the slight impact of Naruto's katana out of the corner of his eye. He had only touched the rock very lightly and immediately afterwards he was simply pulverized. He jumped away from Naruto and skidded a bit as he hit the ground. He stopped and gasped a bit. The extreme heat was getting unbearable even though he was using his strongest barrier. Naruto raised his katana. Zanka no Tachi, Higashi. Kyokujitsujin, Longsword of the Remnant Flame, East. Rising Sun Edge. Naruto raised his sword and showed the bladed side of his katana. My balance break focuses all the flames that my katana produce along the blade tip. Anything my katana touches just gets erased from existence. You must be wondering why your katana didn't split me in two and just lost the blade in the process. Naruto waited 5 seconds and then answered directly. I am sure you got the name right. Where there is an east, there is also a west. Halbor suddenly saw Naruto's engulfed in flames, which spread explosively in all directions. The entire area was enveloped in an inferno. All he could see around them was the sea of flames. Zanka no Tachi, Nishi. Zanjutsu Gokui, Longsword of the Remnant Flame, West. Remnant Sun Prison Garb. The flames calmed down a bit and now Halbor understood. His sword wasn't broken. It had just melted from trying to split Naruto in two while surrounded by those extremely hot flames. While surrounded by these flames, no one can touch me. The earth beneath Naruto began to melt from the extreme heat. It first began to glow yellow before it turned red, and then Naruto's foot sank a bit into the ground. Naruto took a step forward. "I'll end this now." Halbor fired magic after magic at Naruto, but it didn't do any good. No magic from him could hurt Naruto. He was more of a physical fighter. His magic wasn't strong enough to hurt Naruto in this state. Naruto's katana was engulfed in blood-red flames, and immediately he charged. A trail of flames was all he left behind, appearing directly in front of Halbor. He swung his katana. Zanka no Tachi, Kita. Tenchi Kajian, longsword of the remnant flame, north. Heaven and earth end in ashes. Everything in front of Naruto was erased from existence by his blow. A wave of crimson flames obliterated everything in front of Naruto, be it part of the earth, Halbor himself, or the trees behind him. It was like an explosion of blood-red flames that turned everything to ash. When the attack stopped, there was no sign of Halbor. Naruto looked at where Halbor was before, and his katana transformed back and the flames around Naruto disappeared. The air stopped shimmering, and immediately afterwards it started raining inside the barrier. Zest stood outside the barrier and was speechless. Never in her life would she have guessed that Naruto had such power. Halbor was one of the strongest fighters within the organization, and Naruto had easily defeated him with his balance break and turned him completely to ashes. Naruto turned around and his katana disappeared in a red light. He gasped and made a face, holding his left arm. He walked to the edge of the barrier, which slowly began to disintegrate. Naruto hadn't touched the earth this time and therefore hadn't made a scar in the earth's crust. When Halbor was defeated by Naruto, the user of the barrier was also defeated, and as a result, the barrier disintegrated on its own. Naruto looked at Zest as he stopped 2 meters in front of her. "Thanks for your help." Naruto could have defeated Halbor alone with his balance breaker, but Zest had helped him in the fight anyway. "I am so sorry. You were only found because of me, Naruto-sama." Zest looked down at the floor in embarrassment. She had simply put her new master in danger, and that was unforgivable. Naruto sighed and said, "I told you to just call me Naruto. We're both still alive, and that's the main thing." Naruto never thought he'd say those words in this world. Too much has happened in the last 2 weeks. He went past Zest, holding his injured arm. Zest watched after Naruto and stayed put. She wasn't sure what to do now. She was not worthy of being his servant. "Are you coming, Zest?" Naruto called out to her, looking over his shoulder. Zest looked at Naruto in surprise. "You still have to answer a few questions from me." Zest started smiling and ran after him. So, she was of use to him after all. That was all that mattered to her right now. Everything else could wait. She must explain everything about the organization to him. Naruto looked ahead again and took out his phone. He unlocked the screen and dialed a certain number. His arm needed healing, and he could only think of one person who could do it right now. He held the phone to his ear and paused before a female voice rang out. He just told that voice that he was coming to visit and that he had a guest with him. The voice simply accepted the fact and hung up. Naruto looked at Zest. "We're going to visit someone now. Can you disguise your traits as a demon? After all, demons can make their wings disappear. It would be useful if Zest could make her horns and tail disappear. There's bound to be magic that could be used to hide certain parts of your body." "Of course, Naruto-sama." Naruto sighed at being addressed like that again. Now he understood how Jiraiya or Tsunade must have felt, where he always called them by their nickname and not her normal name or title. It was annoying and unbearable. It's no wonder he's been slammed through a wall by Tsunade on numerous occasions, getting a few injuries in the process. Like Sakura, Tsunade had a strong temper, and Naruto triggered that temper more often than he should have. Naruto was allowed to watch as Zest was briefly shrouded in a purple light, and right after that her clothes changed, her horns and rabbit tail also disappeared. She looked like a normal person. She wore a black sweater, blue pants and black boots. Naruto now really realized that he still had more to explain. He really couldn't believe it. What was going on at the moment? Was some higher being playing with him? Now he had one more person in his life to take care of. He didn't even get to talk to Mio or Yuki. The conversation with Mio was the biggest concern so far, but now he first must tell Yuki why a demon was at his side. Yuki made it clear that she didn't like demons. She had a strong sense of protecting normal people and calling demons when necessary. Naruto and Zest got to their destination quickly. Naruto knocked on the door, and after a few seconds the door opened to reveal Chisato Hasegawa. She made way for Naruto and Zest. "Have you gotten into a street fight again, Uzumaki?" Naruto walked past Chisato and walked to the couch. Zest gave Chisato a quick look before walking into her apartment. Chisato came into the living room with a first aid kit and knelt in front of Naruto. "You need to reconsider your way of life, Uzumaki. I can't keep patching you up. I had no intention of getting into a fight today. Naruto sat back and let Chisato fix his arm. He would of course prefer it if she just healed his wound with her magic, but that would give away her identity. Zest thought that Chisato was just a normal woman with medical skulls. I'll just believe you. Chisato was done after 10 minutes and then Naruto sighed. Bandages wrapped his entire arm up to his hand. He could probably still move it freely, but the pain was still there. He just hoped he had a better healing factor as a hero, although he still wasn't sure if he really was a hero. So far, he still hadn't seen any signs of it. He was stronger than before, of course, and he could sense that something was different inside him, but he didn't know what exactly. He hadn't even used or unconsciously activated the hero's aura even in the fight against Halbor. He would have thought that he would activate the aura at least once in battle. Thank you, Ms. Hasegawa. Naruto looked at Zest. She was seated at a table across the room. She had watched the whole time as Chisato patched up Naruto. She had only briefly introduced them once and after that she hadn't spoken a single word. Perhaps you were protecting your new comrade. Chisato adjusted her glasses once as she re-entered the large room. That would be a good explanation as to why Naruto got into a fight. Naruto nodded yes. A man had tried to assault Zest and I couldn't just sit idly by. Naruto stood up and pulled something out of his pocket. Thank you, Ms. Hasegawa. I will be going home now. Naruto put the item on the table and then left the room. Zest said goodbye to Chisato and followed Naruto. Chisato stayed alone in the room and looked at the item Naruto had left behind. She took it in her hand and went into another room. Do you have a place to live? Naruto looked at Zest. He could already guess the answer, but he was hoping for a different one than he thought. I no longer have a permanent place of residence. I betrayed the organization and that's why I am on the run now. Zest bowed once at that and then looked at Naruto again. Do you have money to book a hotel? No. Alright, come with me first. We'll organize something for you. Naruto turned around and started walking. Luckily, he still had his old mattress in the living room. There was nothing in his living room and he had a faint idea that he would use this mattress again. He just didn't think there would ever be a demon in his apartment. Unfortunately, he had no other choice. He couldn't just leave Zest alone like that. She had information that would be useful. He now officially had a group that he considered as enemies. He only accidentally made this group his opponents, but it was now, and hell need any information he could get. Zest just went after him. She wouldn't dare contradict him today. She put her life in his hands. From today on he was her new master. At least from Zest's point of view. Naruto, of course, didn't see Zest as his servant. Naruto had only noticed at Chisato's apartment that today was Wednesday. Whatever Chisato did to him lasted from Sunday to Wednesday afternoon. He must talk to Chisato in person tomorrow. He rubbed his temples a bit because his head was starting to hurt. He really had gotten way too much attention by some stupid coincidence. If Zolgir had never shown up, he wouldn't be where he was right now. I see. Jin held his phone to his ear while puffing on his cigarette. He was standing in front of a restaurant in Kuoh and was currently on the phone. So, he finished Halbor. The brat isn't bad. You were right in your assessment. Yes, I know. I'll meet up with the boy in the next few days and train him a bit. He still hasn't awakened his hero power. Understood. I'll get back to you if there's anything new. Jin ended the call and put his phone in his pocket. It's getting interesting again. Now the brat really has the servant of Zolgir at his side. He remembered a time when he was younger and fought many demons in wars. There was a certain woman that he hadn't just fought. With this demon he also had a very special bond after some events, and from that his son was born. He looked up at the sky and thought of his two wives, who he hadn't seen for several years. Naruto could finally give him a chance to get his two wives back. So far, he hadn't been able to do anything, but Naruto seemed to be triggering some events that could benefit him. Just wait, Sapphire. Raphaeline. I will soon have you by my side again, and after that I will never let you go. Jin went back into the restaurant and made his way to his table, where was a man with black hair and blonde bangs. You were right. The brat really has an unknown sacred gear. The man at the other end of the table grinned slightly and continued his story. His balance break is scary. I am excited to see what else he's up to. Jin nodded and then the food came to the table. We will see. The boy has a lot of potential. The man across from Jin nodded and then they both started to eat. Thanks for watching.